Imagine dying in a pool of your own blood, only to wake up in a bed so soft that you immediately get slapped into next week by a crying orange-haired kid. Our guy is completely stunned, wondering who in the absolute hell just touched his face, only to look in the mirror and realize he is no longer a scarred, battle-hardened mercenary, but has traveled 15 years back in time into the body of a ultra-rich, noble pretty boy. But before he can even enjoy his new life of luxury, he's dragged in front of his new terrifying giant of a father, who looks at him with a glowing golden eye and asks, "Why are you alive?" But to understand how a gritty mercenary captain ended up as a soft-handed anime lord, we have to go back. In this world, people say third-rate mercenaries are the ones who don't die, because they're paid to lay down their lives for their masters. Our guy Jake has had to listen to this absolute garbage from stuck-up nobles every single day of his miserable, grinding career. But that is just the brutal reality of the gig. And honestly, these highborn lords are all copy-pasted trash. When their castles are burning, they'll promise you land, titles, and a shiny new future. But the second the danger passes, they run their mouths and change their tunes, spouting the most creative excuses to avoid paying up. But the offer Jake just heard on top of this crumbling wall takes the absolute cake. The commander-in-chief of the forces, this red-haired guy, looks at him and straight up tells him to go die. Jake smiles, asking if the commander forgot who he's talking to. But the commander isn't laughing, because a noble knight would never order a dirty mercenary to fight and die with honor, unless things were completely desperate. The commander, Crawford, closes his eyes and admits he got ahead of himself. Jake's smile turns sharp. Crawford claims he just wants to entrust the mercenary captain with one final legendary mission. See, their army has taken L after L, and the rebels are currently burning the city to the ground. The enemy is at the very throat of the Crawford family, and with nowhere left to run, Jake pretends to be deeply sympathetic to the noble's sudden mid-crisis ramble. He puts on his best customer service face while internally deciding that it is officially time to pack up and bail. I mean, if the most talented knight in the Empire is cornered like a rat, the game is already over. But Crawford outlines the mission. The rebels are launching an all-out offensive tomorrow, and Jake's men need to hold them off until Crawford's lord escapes, or until Crawford himself dies in battle. To seal the deal, Crawford pulls out a massive red gem. But before he can even finish explaining that it covers 3 years of mercenary costs, Jake slaps it straight out of his hand. Crawford is stunned. Jake's eyes go completely bloodshot. He asks if Crawford took him for an absolute clown, just because he's always smiling. This isn't a mission, it's a suicide order. Crawford wants Jake's men to act as meat shields, just to buy some fat noble a few extra seconds to run away. And Jake knows exactly what happens next. Once Crawford is dead, the rebels aren't going to just let some dirty mercenaries walk away. Jake laughs, a cold, mocking sound. He knows the brutal reality of their line of work, and he knows the rebels want to tear his mercenary core limb from limb because of how they play the game. See, Jake's men don't do honorable duels. They do whatever it takes to survive. Earlier on the battlefield, the enemy knights found a pile of dead mercenary bodies, only for one of the corpses to suddenly drive a dagger straight through a knight's throat. The other knights panicked, realizing too late that they had walked directly into a trap. Jake and his men had disguised themselves as dead soldiers, and they absolutely butchered the enemy reinforcements from behind. A rebel commander on horseback screamed at them, asking if they have any concept of honor, but Jake just leaped through the air, his blade cutting a clean arc through the wind, and sent the commander's head rolling onto the dirt. Honor doesn't pay the bills, and it definitely doesn't keep you breathing. Jake has cut the throats of countless high-born commanders using these exact underhanded tactics, and Crawford knows that the rebels are dying to get their hands on the Fang mercenaries. Crawford's jaw tightens. He realizes Jake has fully caught on to his plan to use them as bait. So, Crawford resorts to the classic noble option. Comply, or I will cut you down myself and take your men. Jake draws his sword with a clean flick. He thought Crawford was slightly different from the other arrogant trash nobles, but turns out he's just the biggest clown of them all. Crawford actually apologizes, saying he means it sincerely, but Jake tells him not to sweat it. Taking the head of a hypocritical bastard like Crawford and handing it over to the rebels to beg for his men's lives is going to taste absolutely sweet. But Crawford points out the flaw. Even if Jake takes his head, the rebels won't let the rest of the mercenaries go free. Jake smiles. 2 heads, he says. Crawford's eyes widen as he realizes the sheer, unhinged madness of Jake's plan. Jake is going to offer up his own head alongside Crawford's. He dragged his men into this gutter on his own selfish whim, and as their captain, he's going to take absolute responsibility to ensure they walk out alive. Crawford stares at him, completely dumbfounded by this display of suicidal loyalty. Then, the noble commander starts to laugh. He admits that Jake is a true leader and covers his face, muttering that it's a tragedy because he wishes Jake had been his actual lord instead of the cowards he serves. But respect doesn't mean mercy. In an instant, Jake lunges, unleashing a desperate, screaming strike. Crawford stands perfectly still, the blue light of his mana swirling like a hurricane, his eyes narrowing to a razor-thin slit. A single flash of silver cuts through the dark, and Jake falls. The gap in natural talent is simply too massive. Crawford didn't even have to try. As Jake lies dying in his own blood, he comforts himself knowing he told his men to run if he didn't return. But as the darkness closes in, a bitter thought echoes in his mind. If he had been given the same noble opportunities, the same training, the same high-born cheat codes, just how high could he have climbed? He expects eternal silence, but instead, he opens his eyes to a stunningly beautiful ceiling and a golden-haired boy staring back at him. Jake sits up in a massive, silk-draped bed, completely lost. He looks at his hands and realizes his rough, calloused, battle-scarred fingers are completely gone. Instead, his hands are so soft and pristine, they practically smell like fresh-cut grass. He looks over at the orange-haired kid crying next to him, wondering who this screeching brat is and why he was just slapping his face. The kid, Hans, is crying so hard he's practically vibrating, screaming about how glad he is that his young master didn't pass away. Hans blabbers on, saying that if the young master had died, he would have been executed, which would be a massive family tragedy. Jake's jaw drops. He has absolutely no idea what nonsense this kid is spouting. Young master? Personal servant? Family? None of these words have ever belonged to a gutter-born mercenary. He vividly remembers his chest getting sliced open by Crawford, a strike so clean that surviving it was physically impossible. So how in the absolute hell is his head still attached to his neck? He sits there in silence, and looking at the sheer luxury of the room, he can only draw one logical conclusion. He has somehow been isekai'd into the body of a complete stranger. He stands up, walks over to a massive gold-trimmed mirror, and is greeted by a flawless, elegant face that practically radiates peak aristocratic wealth. This guy's family clearly has old money written all over their gold-plated molding. Jake realizes he needs to dig up some intel on who this pretty boy actually is, so he clears his throat and calls out to Hans, asking a simple question. What year is it? Hans looks confused, but replies that it is Imperial Year 846. Jake freezes. Imperial Year 846? That is exactly 15 years before the day he died. He didn't just steal a body, he regressed to the past. He takes a deep breath, pushing down the panic, and prepares to ask the most important question. He grabs Hans by the shoulder, his eyes flashing with a mercenary's killer instinct, and asks, "Who am I?" The sudden shift in his aura is so terrifying that Hans immediately drops to his knees. Hans begs for forgiveness, screaming that he was just flustered earlier, and yells out that the young master's noble name is Lucian Valdek. Jake's eyes go wide. Valdek? He looks out the window at the massive flag bearing a golden lion crest, and his jaw hits the floor. House Valdek is not just any noble family. They are a legendary pillar of the empire, boasting power and wealth that rivals the imperial throne itself. And Jake is incredibly familiar with this exact estate. Because 15 years ago, before he became a mercenary captain, he worked right here as a lowly, underpaid gate guard. He went from yawning at their front gates to becoming the third son of the entire family. The irony is almost too much to handle. In his past life, these highborn nobles threw coins at him like he was a stray dog, leaving him to bleed out in the mud just because his status was low. He spent his entire life grinding in the dirt, while guys like Crawford got 5-star treatment from birth. And now, the universe has handed him the ultimate noble cheat code. Jake smiles, a wild, ambitious grin breaking across his new, beautiful face. If the world wants him to prove what he can do with a golden spoon in his mouth, he is going to give them a masterclass. He flings open the balcony doors, staring out at the sun-drenched estate, promising that this time, he is going to climb to the absolute top of the food chain. He gets dressed and starts walking through the massive corridors of the Valdek Grand Duchy. He's seen a lot of fancy palaces in his life, but the sheer, sparkling opulence of this place is actually ridiculous. He needs to get used to this high society layout as fast as possible, but as he walks, he notices something highly uncomfortable. The maids and guards are all huddling in corners, whispering to each other, staring at him like he's a walking ghost. The sheer, icy tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a dagger. Jake asks Hans if he's just imagining things, but Hans tells him it's completely natural. See, the original Lucian was a massive recluse, who spent the last year and 2 months locked in his room, refusing to meet a single living soul. Jake internally facepalms. What kind of spoiled brat has the ultimate life of luxury and spends it cooped up in a corner? But more importantly, this family is ruled by Grand Duke Sigmund, a man of absolute principles. There is no way a legendary powerhouse like Sigmund would just let his own son rot in a dark room, unless Lucian was a complete failure, or there was a dark, hidden family secret. As Jake is plotting his next move to avoid the Grand Duke, a massive black boot steps into the corridor. Jake freezes as a calm, polished voice echoes through the hallway, noting that the reports of his recovery were indeed true. It's an elegant, silver-haired gentleman in a pristine tuxedo. Hans immediately bows, while Jake's mercenary instincts scream in alarm. This is head butler Edwin. He was once a hostage from a hostile family, but rose to become the Grand Duke's absolute right hand through sheer, terrifying competence. This is extremely bad news. Edwin is incredibly sharp, and he will instantly spot any slip-up or gutter-born behavior from Jake. Jake realizes he needs a disguise, so he decides to mimic the most noble-like person he has ever met, his old enemy, Crawford. He forces a dazzling, flower-framed noble smile, thanking the head butler for his concern, explaining that he has finally recovered and wants to look into the family affairs he neglected. Edwin's eyes narrow slightly, a long tense silence stretching between them. Then, the butler's face softens, and he expresses his relief that the young master remains unchanged. Jake internally exhales, thinking he successfully pulled off the ultimate deception, and prepares to wave goodbye and make a clean retreat back to his room. But just as he turns his back, Edwin's voice drops to a cold, serious tone. "Young master, please delay your return for a moment." Edwin looks at him with dead, green eyes. The Grand Duke wishes to see you, right now. Jake is escorted to a massive double-door study, where a towering figure sits behind a mahogany desk. This is Grand Duke Sigmund, the giant of the Empire, sitting with his eyes covered in a dark blindfold. The sheer crushing pressure in the room makes it hard to even breathe. Sigmund pulls back his blindfold, revealing a single burning golden eye that locks onto Jake like a predator, and says, "I ask you, Lucian Valdek, why are you alive?" So, we are starting exactly where we left off. Our guy is standing in front of the most powerful military lord in the Empire, and the first thing he gets asked is why he hasn't kicked the bucket yet. Talk about a warm family reunion. Lucian is standing there sweat dropping, trying to process if his new dad is actually planning to finish the job right here. But Sigmund isn't drawing his sword just yet. He explains that he was willing to let it slide when Lucian locked himself in his room for over a year, using his mother's death as an excuse to avoid his noble duties. But apparently, our pretty boy crossed a major line this time. He accuses Lucian of treating his own life like a joke and trying to end it all. And that is when the pieces finally click together in Lucian's head. He remembers waking up to his servant Hans, crying actual oceans of tears, screaming about how glad he was that his master didn't die. He tries to play it cool and claim there is a massive misunderstanding, but the Grand Duke is completely done listening to excuses. He demands that Lucian spill whatever pathetic thoughts he has been hiding in that small mind of his, and he reveals the exact method of the crime: sleeping pills, shoved down his throat with his own weak hands, just to cause a massive scene in the estate. Lucian's eyes go sharp. He finally realizes why he had absolutely zero memory of the third young master from his past life. 15 years ago, back when our main character was just a broke commoner working as a gate guard for this exact mansion, the third young master was already dead and buried. And here is the actual family dynamic of the Waldeck household. The Grand Duke is an absolute unit who has 4 sons, and every single one of them was born to a different mother. It is basically a battle royale for the inheritance, and during his 10 years working here as a guard, Jake saw almost all of them, except for Lucian and his mother. The mother died of a sudden illness early on, and Lucian apparently followed her to the grave shortly after. Back then, the guards just assumed they were a pair of sickly nobles who couldn't handle the weather. But the actual truth is way darker. Lucian was young, completely isolated, and his position in the family was as stable as a house of cards. He didn't actually want to die. He just took a massive dose of sleeping pills, hoping it would make his cold-blooded father look at him for once. But the kid was an absolute idiot when it came to biology. He didn't calculate just how weak his own body was, and he ended up accidentally deleting his own character file right then and there, leaving a vacant seat for our mercenary captain to take over. Lucian realizes this is a massive headache. The Grand Duke hasn't seen his son in an entire year, and the first thing he does is deliver a brutal lecture. But honestly, from a father's perspective, his kid basically staged a fake suicide that went horribly wrong. His anger makes complete sense. Unfortunately for Sigmund, our guy is a cold-blooded mercenary who does not care about family trauma. He realizes he is standing on the edge of a massive cliff here, and the Grand Duke's tone is a literal ultimatum. The physical pressure in the room is cracking the marble floor, and Lucian can literally hear the sound of his rich, lazy future breaking into pieces. If he says even a single wrong word right now, his best-case scenario is getting shipped off to a remote church to live as a broke priest, saying goodbye to luxury forever. Or worse, getting dragged to a frozen northern wasteland to get chased by giant bears for the rest of his very short, miserable life. He clenches his teeth. He didn't survive a literal war and get his throat sliced open just to end up as a monk or bear food. There is absolutely no way he is letting some dead kid's family drama ruin his dream of a comfortable retirement. He takes a deep breath, relaxes his posture, and decides to put on a show. He bows with the kind of perfect, shimmering grace that would make a veteran diplomat cry. He apologizes for smearing the family name with his foolishness. He says there is no room for excuses, and that he will willingly accept whatever punishment his father decides to hand out. The head butler, Edwin, is standing in the corner, staring at him like he just saw a dog start speaking fluent philosophy. But Lucian isn't done. He looks right into the Grand Duke's golden eyes and asks why they shouldn't just celebrate instead. He says what is done, and staring at the past isn't going to change a single thing. So instead of tying his new life, which was literally salvaged from the brink of death, to a bunch of regrets, he snaps his boots together, stands perfectly straight, and announces that he plans to live as diligently as possible for the future. He flashes a confident, slightly arrogant smile that looks absolutely nothing like the weak kid who used to cower in the corner. He tells Sigmund that as his father, instead of a lord, he should offer him a single word of encouragement. A child who repents should be embraced by his parent. He calls it the proper duty of a family bound by the laws of heaven. The butler's jaw has officially hit the floor. Edwin is staring at Lucian's back, completely unable to match this absolute menace of a young man with the terrified boy he knew. The kid who used to shake like a leaf whenever someone raised their voice is currently lecturing the most terrifying man in the Empire on parenting. The Grand Duke sits in absolute silence, staring at his son as his heart beats heavy against his chest. Lucian doesn't blink. he maintains his perfect noble smile, holding the eye contact like an absolute champion. Sigmund finally speaks, his hand tapping slowly against his desk. He asks him how he dares to raise his voice and lecture him on his parental duties. But then, he lets out a quiet, amused scoff, saying he has officially lived long enough to see everything. Lucian keeps his polite smile up, but internally, he is celebrating like he just won the lottery. His gamble paid off perfectly. He knew exactly what kind of man his father was from his past life. Sigmund Waldeck is a warlord. He absolutely despises weak, submissive rats who walk on eggshells, but he has a massive soft spot for wild dogs who have the guts to bite back. The Grand Duke notes that his son has gotten incredibly bold after his little trip to the afterlife. He sits back and decides to test him. Since Lucian mentioned being diligent, he asks what his actual plans are. Lucian Waldeck, what do you actually plan to do from now on? Lucian closes his eyes and recalls the sheer, overwhelming physical power of his killer, Commander Crawford. He remembers the brilliant, blinding light of that sword, cutting through his armor like paper. He knows that in this world, if you don't have military power, you are basically just a very shiny target for the next rebellion. He opens his eyes and delivers his answer. First, he will fix his broken, fragile body. And after that, he plans to learn the sword properly. The Grand Duke looks at him like he just said he wants to fly to the moon. The sword? You? Lucian admits he needs to fix his paper doll body first, but he casually says that if he just eats and sleeps well, it will probably work out somehow. Sigmund stares at him for a long, quiet moment, a small, genuine smirk appearing on his face. He tells him he certainly has a way with words, but whether it is just empty bluffing is something he will find out by watching him. He turns to the silver-haired butler and orders him to give Lucian that again. Edwin bows, noting that a physical gift will definitely be more useful to the young master right now than empty words. Lucian is standing there looking incredibly confused. The butler says he will process the request immediately, leaving our main character completely in the dark. What on earth is that? A few hours later, outside the massive white marble mansion, several heavily loaded wooden carriages pull up to the courtyard. Strong laborers are carrying massive, metal-trimmed wooden chests up the steps. They open the lid, and the inside is literally overflowing with sparkling gold coins, expensive jewelry, and silver cups. Lucian is standing there with his mouth wide open, looking like a gamer who just discovered an infinite gold exploit on day one. He realizes this is the sheer scale of a high noble's household. And the best part, this massive chest of gold is literally just his monthly allowance. Just for 1 month. He lets out a low, villainous laugh, holding the gold coins in his hands with a face that looks completely unhinged. With this ridiculous amount of funding, he can finally purchase the rare ingredients he needs to completely overhaul his weak body and brew the legendary elixir. Hashtag, we open chapter 4 in a massive, beautiful glass greenhouse filled with rare, vibrant flowers. Grand Duke Sigmund is walking slowly through the paths, with Edwin following a step behind. The butler notes that this greenhouse was the favorite place of the late Grand Duchess when she was still alive. It has been a long time since the master visited, and he realizes Sigmund came here specifically because of the massive change in Lucian. Even though the young master fell out of favor for a long time, he is still the child of the woman the Grand Duke cherished more than anything, so there was no way Sigmund would ever truly abandon him. Sigmund walks in silence, his heavy white cape trailing behind him. He stops and recalls how pathetic his third son used to be. The kid was always busy rolling his eyes, trembling in fear, and whining like a beaten dog whenever his father raised his voice even a little bit. He admits to Edwin that because Lucian's attitude was so completely different from his mother's, he believed the only thing the boy inherited was her looks. But for the very first time today, he realizes he might have been completely wrong about his son. He notes how the child looked him directly in the eyes and stated his opinion without a single hint of fear. Edwin agrees, calling it a truly confident display. The butler gently explains that Lucian simply has a tender heart and thinks deeply, which is why he hesitated compared to his aggressive older brothers. He says the young master has definitely inherited the Grand Duke's blood. Sigmund lets out a quiet hum, saying that remains to be seen. The path ahead of his son is filled with challenges that cannot be solved with just pretty words. And that is when Edwin drops a massive piece of bad news. Master, we have a problem. He explains that even though they just resumed Lucian's support funds, someone has already leaked that information to the outside. And their investigation points directly to the second young master, Geordie Waldeck. Not only did Geordie leak the financial info, but he also fired the head maid, who was assisting Lucian, and replaced her with one of his own personal spies. He is actively trying to keep the third young master on a tight leash. Sigmund frowns, calling Geordie a capable child, but noting his character is far too narrow and petty. Edwin asks if they should step in and handle it, but the Grand Duke immediately tells him to leave it alone. He says Geordie's move is a petty trick that wouldn't even work if Lucian knew how to manage his own surroundings properly. It is the price Lucian has to pay for being asleep for a whole year. He wants to watch and see exactly how his son handles this snake in his grass. If Lucian can't even handle a basic sibling rivalry, there is absolutely no point in having any expectations for him. He thinks to himself that even if the blood of the golden lion runs in their veins, opening the door to greatness is something they must do with their own hands. A few days later, back at the estate, the sun is shining bright over the grand white towers. But the atmosphere inside is incredibly tense. Two maids are whispering in the hallway, asking how many days the third young master has been locked in his room. They are convinced he has lost his mind and gone back into seclusion. Outside the door, our boy Hans is standing guard like a hyper-aggressive guard dog, glaring at anyone who dares to whisper. It has been 3 days since the allowance gold arrived, and Lucian hasn't stepped a single foot out of his private quarters. Hans looks at the massive empty chests and remembers how Lucian claimed the meeting with the Grand Duke went perfectly. He knows how terrifying the master is, and he realizes it must have been an absolute nightmare for the fragile young lord to stand before him. He thinks about how much courage his master had to summon just to secure his future. He starts crying his signature rivers of tears, convinced that Lucian is currently crying his eyes out in secret, trying to move past his grief. Meanwhile, on the other side of that door, our guy is absolutely not crying. In fact, he is laughing like a literal cartoon villain, surrounded by piles of gold and expensive equipment. He is standing over a table filled with boiling chemical flasks and glass tubes. He has turned his high-class noble bedroom into a full-blown meth lab. He wipes the sweat from his forehead, looking exhausted but completely victorious. He notes that Hans is doing a fantastic job guarding the door, keeping his secrets perfectly safe from the rest of the household. He looks down at the brewing tools that a Grand Duke's son would never touch in a million years, and he looks at the massive sacks of purple flowers piled on the floor. This is the moonlight herb, a flower that is disgustingly expensive because it only grows under the light of the moon, and which current imperial scholars think is completely useless. Lucian spent his entire massive allowance buying up every single scrap of this flower he could find. He knows he looks like a complete lunatic to the merchants right now, but in exactly 1 year from now, the price of this useless flower is going to skyrocket by over 20 times the current market rate. He lets out a massive, unhinged laugh. He is basically buying the dip on a massive scale before the rest of the world even realizes there is a market. And here is why. In the future timeline, the Alchemist Guild is going to make the boldest gamble in history. At this point in time, their research is still a massive secret, but they are currently buying up every single moonlight herb in the Empire to create something revolutionary. They are betting their entire guild's fate on a single recipe, and they are going to succeed in creating a legendary elixir that will shake the balance of power in the entire world. The drink of the gods. Nectar. They almost got executed for blasphemy, just for naming a drug after the gods. But once the actual effects of the potion were revealed, everyone immediately forgot about the church and started begging for a single drop. Because for over 1,000 years, there was one absolute rule in this world that could never be broken. The maximum potential of a warrior is determined the exact second they are born. If you are born a talentless commoner, you stay a talentless commoner forever. Your limits are locked in stone. But nectar changed everything. It literally shattered that common sense into pieces. Just by drinking it, even a person with absolutely zero magical talent could refine their body and become an elite swordsman. It was a literal cheat code for reality. Of course, the bootleg version Lucian is brewing right now falls far short of the original guild's formula. But to fix a fragile, broken body like this one, there is absolutely nothing better in the entire world. He looks at his hands, thinking about how lucky the original, weak Lucian is to have a veteran mercenary occupying his brain. In the future, when the war broke out, the Alchemist Guild was the very first thing to burn, because their recipe was far too dangerous to exist. The official recipe vanished from the world forever. But during his mercenary days, Jake managed to gather several scraps of information, lab notes, and clues to recreate a mass-produced, discount version of the formula. Most of the commoners who experimented with it ended up dying from horrible side effects, but our guy does not care about the safety warnings. He pops the cork and downs the red liquid in one go. He sits down on the floor as the liquid hits his stomach. From now on, the actual work begins. Mana circulation is all about how well you can spread energy through your veins and pull it back to your core. The quality of your path determines your strength. He is currently using the raw power of his bootleg nectar to forcibly smash open the blocked energy pathways inside Lucian's body. But as the energy begins to flow, Lucian's eyes snap open in absolute shock. What on earth is this? Usually, when you force mana into a weak body, the resistance causes absolute bone-shattering pain that makes people pass out. But right now, there is zero resistance. The mana is flowing smoothly, like water returning to a riverbed. Even newborn babies have impurities that block their circulation. But as Lucian looks deep into his own mind, he finds himself floating in a massive, deep blue ocean of pure, unobstructed energy. And swimming right beneath him is a massive, majestic white whale, representing a level of natural talent that shouldn't even be physically possible. Our cynical mercenary captain has just realized he didn't just steal a rich kid's body. He literally took over the body of a once-in-a-generation legendary genius. Another beautiful morning in the Empire. The birds are singing, the sky is bright, and Hans is currently pacing outside our guy's room, having a complete panic attack. He is looking at the door like it is about to explode. Then, the handle turns, and Lucian casually steps out into the sunlight. Hans immediately lunges forward, crying like a toddler who lost his mom in a grocery store. He unloads a massive wall of text, crying about how Lucian didn't answer his calls, and how he was terrified something horrible had happened inside. He stops mid-sentence when he actually looks at his master. Our guy is standing there with a calm, gentle smile. His eyes are bright gold, clear, and completely focused. Hans takes a step back, suddenly feeling like he is looking at a complete stranger. He gets right in Lucian's face, squinting his eyes and trying to spot the difference. Lucian just keeps smiling, realizing he needs to be careful. Hans has spent more time with the original Lucian than anyone else in this estate. If our guy acts out of character for even a second, the kid is going to notice. But physically, there are no massive changes to his appearance yet. The real magic is happening on the inside. His heart is beating with a powerful, rhythmic strength. Lucian's physical constitution is absorbing the mana like a sponge. He is absolutely certain of it now. This body is a literal cheat code. If he plays his cards right, he will easily surpass his past mercenary prime in less than a year. He turns to Hans and tells him that he owes this massive success to him. He puts a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. His face suddenly drops into a dark, shadowy expression. He tells him to scrape together every single coin he owns, sell his underwear if he has to, and go all in on Moonlight Herb. He is talking like a crazy crypto bro, guaranteeing a smooth ride to the absolute top of the market. He strikes a ridiculous, dramatic pose, screaming about reaching the skies. He admits he is actually jealous of Hans, because back in his day, commoners never got investment tips from nobles. 1 week later, a peaceful, quiet forest. Our guy is walking leisurely through the path, his hands resting behind his head. He is literally whistling a tune, looking like a tourist on vacation. He is enjoying every single second of this rich, pampered lifestyle. Feasts served like clockwork, servants cleaning his room, soft bedding prepared without him lifting a finger. He actually sheds a single tear, remembering the days when starving was his main hobby. But this peaceful week also gave him a chance to investigate a massive question. He reaches into his blazer, thinking about the mystery that has been weighing on his mind, the existence of Jake, the mercenary captain, who used to work here as a gate guard 15 years ago. He checked with the captain of the guards, but apparently, no one fitting Jake's description has ever worked here. The guard shift he used to work is currently occupied by a complete stranger. He presses his hands together in a quiet prayer. Honestly, he is glad. He doesn't have the mental strength to face his past, broke self, without dying of cringe. He starts shaking with laughter, which completely terrifies Hans. Hans runs up, asking if he is okay. He looks at the massive stone fortress ahead and asks if Lucian is really going inside. This is the family training grounds. Lucian looks confused, asking if he said something about avoiding this place. Hans nods frantically, reminding him that he swore he would never set foot here after what the second young master did to him. Lucian looks at Hans's terrified expression and immediately pieces the backstory together. Jordy didn't just ignore his younger brother. He physically abused him under the guise of training to ensure he would never show his face in public again. Lucian smiles, telling Hans there is absolutely nothing to worry about. That is all in the past. He steps forward. His golden eyes flash with a dangerous light as he tells Hans to just trust him. Inside the massive stone hall, the sound of wooden swords clashing echoes off the high walls. 2 guards are standing in the corner, whispering. One of them is frantically explaining that the third young master just arrived on his own 2 feet. Standing behind them is a man with wavy red hair and a thick mustache. This is Sir Hendrik. He listens to the report, his green eyes flashing with absolute malice. He smiles, ordering the guard to go report this to him immediately. He snaps his fingers, whispering that he is going to cook this little brat up nicely by the time Jordy arrives. Lucian walks into the courtyard, looking around in absolute awe. The place is fantastic. Racks of spare weapons lined up neatly, a massive open arena with perfect stone flooring. He is genuinely jealous that a single family owns a training facility of this scale. He thinks about his old mercenary squad, realizing that if they had a place like this to train, many of his men would still be alive. Heavy leather boots step onto the stone behind him. Hendrik approaches with a loud, mocking laugh, clattering his wooden sword. He sneers, saying he vividly remembers how Lucian turned tail and ran like a scared rabbit a year ago. He gets right in Lucian's face, looking at him like a wolf, staring at a helpless lamb. He asks if he is still terrified of this place, mocking him for bringing a simple servant into a sacred hall of warriors. He crosses his arms, offering a fake, highly disrespectful greeting. He leans down, his eyes glowing with a sickening green light. He asks Lucian if he remembers the lessons he personally gave him alongside Jordy. He touches his chin, smiling like a complete psychopath as he recalls those violent days. Lucian slowly bows his head, his face hidden in the shadows. And then, a terrifying, razor-sharp smirk spreads across our guy's face. Hashtag, here is a quick lesson on how this world views knights. They are supposed to be the absolute incarnation of honor, loyalty, and noble etiquette. They train from childhood, earn their titles on the battlefield, and find their entire purpose in serving their lord. But in the eyes of our mercenary captain, they are just hunting dogs wearing expensive collars. That is why they are obligated to show absolute respect to their lord's family. Yet this red-haired mustache is currently standing here, acting like he owns the place. He stands tall, playing with his mustache with a smug, condescending look. He is only doing this because he knows Lucian has zero power in the family. And more importantly, he is wearing a literal, invisible leash. He is Jordy's loyal dog, acting out because he knows his master has his back. Lucian's golden eyes narrow. If this were his past life, he would have handled this guy by using him as target practice for his throwing knives. But he has to play the political game now. The Grand Duke is watching, and beating up a core asset of the family's military power without a formal reason will only create unnecessary friction. It is not the right time to show his hand just yet. So, he puts on his best dramatic voice, claiming it is foolish to avoid training just because of a minor incident in the past. He crosses his arms, politely stating that he wants to stop by often to learn the basic sword forms. Hendrik immediately bursts into a loud, mocking laugh that echoes through the entire hall. He gets right in Lucian's face, telling him that if you are past the age of 15, the path of mana is permanently closed. He explains, with absolute arrogance, that sword forms are ancient, sacred techniques. They are only useful if your mana paths are open, which starting at 16 is physically impossible. He calls Lucian's plan a useless, empty dance that will only result in physical exhaustion. He leans in, his mustache twitching with a sickening grin. He suggests that Lucian should focus on becoming the Empire's #1 dancer instead, or perhaps spend his time doing some light gardening. The other guards in the background start whispering and snickering. Hendrik crosses his arms, looking incredibly proud of his own cheap wit, convinced he has completely silenced the boy. But he doesn't realize that the path closing at 16 is a complete, scientifically incorrect lie. It is a myth designed to keep commoners from trying to train. But our guy doesn't care about correcting his biology. His goal is already achieved. He wanted Hendrik to dig his own grave in public. Lucian suddenly grabs his own wrist, his hands shaking in fake, theatrical horror. He stammers out that the path of mana closes at 25, not 16. He asks, with a trembling voice, if his brother Jordy actually shares this incredibly stupid view. Hendrik just laughs, waving his hand and saying of course he does, because it is obvious common sense. Lucian's hand slowly rises in the air. He slaps it heavily onto Hans's head, his face turning into a picture of absolute despair. Hans, the Valdek family is officially doomed. He lets out a loud, dramatic scream that shakes the entire room. He screams about how a knight of the Grand Duchy is spreading incorrect knowledge that has ruined countless talents. He clutches his head, crying about how his brother Jordy apparently has a completely hollow skull. Hendrik and the guards are standing there, completely frozen in shock. Lucian's eyes suddenly flash with a dark, predatory light. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the entire training hall. Hendrik takes a step back, sweating profusely as he asks what Lucian is trying to say. Lucian's aura suddenly vanishes, his voice dropping to a calm, polite tone. Ah, please forget what I just said. There is no way a noble knight would do something so petty. Hendrik lets out a heavy sigh of relief, thinking he is safe. But then, Lucian steps right into his personal space, his face turning into a demonic grin. He tells him that since Hendrik admitted to spreading this nonsense, this is a matter they absolutely cannot overlook. Sir Hendrik, you clearly do not realize how serious this is. Hendrik is shaking, completely lost as to how the conversation flipped so fast. Lucian starts pacing, throwing his arms wide in a brilliant display of gaslighting. He claims he was willing to let Hendrik's personal insults slide because of his own past weakness. But spreading false military knowledge that hinders the recruitment of talent, that is a direct threat to the military power of the Grand Duchy. A grave danger to the safety of the citizens they are sworn to protect. He screams that as a member of the Valdek family, it is his absolute duty to be outraged. He is smiling internally, celebrating how perfectly he nailed the performance. He points a single, sharp finger directly at Hendrik's chest. He tells him to prepare himself, because he is going to report this directly to the Grand Duke and demand a full internal crackdown. Hendrik is sweating bullets, staring at him with absolute terror. This is not the fragile lamb he bullied a year ago. He feels like he is standing in front of a giant, shadow-draped wolf that is about to tear him limb from limb. Suddenly, a gloved hand wearing a massive red gem ring steps into the frame. Heavy, confident footsteps echo from the entrance of the hall. Hendrik turns his head, his face lighting up with desperate hope. Lord Jordy! Lucian doesn't turn around immediately. He just lets out a quiet, dangerous laugh under his breath. The second son of House Valdek has finally entered the arena, and things are about to get incredibly messy. So, the second young master has officially entered the chat. Hendrik immediately runs over like a dog begging for his owner's help, stuttering and sweat dropping as he tries to explain the absolute disaster of a situation. But Jordy doesn't even let him finish. He raises a single finger, cutting him off instantly. He flashes a calm, handsome smile that looks perfect on the surface, but as he pulls Hendrik close, his voice drops to a chilling whisper. He tells him he saw his entire disgraceful, pathetic display with his own eyes. He grips Hendrik's shoulder with enough force to crack bone, warning him to control his face before he makes things even worse for both of them. He turns his attention back to Lucian, walking forward with slow, deliberate steps. Hans is literally shaking like a leaf, gripping Lucian's sleeve and whispering that they are in massive trouble. But our guy is just standing there with a dark, satisfied smirk. This is Jordy Valdek, the perfect, elegant second son of the family, who has been secretly mauling because his older brother is pushing him out of the succession line. He has been bringing in outside mercenaries to build his own army and overturn the board. Lucian puts on a beautiful, flawless, noble smile, greeting his beloved older brother. Jordy stares back at him with absolute, cold-blooded hostility. He calls Lucian a foolish child, asking what on earth he thinks he is doing. He says he was watching from the shadows the entire time, and accuses Lucian of damaging the dignity of the Valdek family by making a scene. Lucian just shrugs, letting out a fake gasp of confusion. Jordy explains, very smoothly, that Hendrik simply made a minor mistake by putting Jordy's name forward and increasing unnecessary chaos. But he has no intention of punishing Hendrik, because the knight has shed blood for the family. He glares at Lucian, his eyes glowing gold as he adds, unlike you. He pokes Lucian's chest, reminding him that a coward who ran away from swordsmanship training has zero right to judge a loyal knight. Lucian just keeps his head bowed, playing along perfectly. Jordy turns to the rest of the gathered knights, raising his voice, making sure every single guard in the room can hear him. He loudly apologizes on Lucian's behalf laugh, calling the entire situation the silly mistake of an immature, foolish child. He flashes a smug, arrogant grin, promising to take special care of his beloved younger brother. He is smiling like he just won a massive chess match, but internally, Lucian is laughing his head off. Our guy realizes Geordie's head actually spins pretty fast. By publicly calling Lucian immature, Geordie successfully saved his own face while turning the knight's anger against his brother. Lucian smiles. Fine. He is more than happy to let Geordie have this petty win, because he is about to turn Geordie's entire smug speech into a complete comedy routine. He clenches his fist, tears practically welling up in his eyes as he puts on the performance of a lifetime. He screams about how incredibly benevolent his older brother is. He yells that he should be severely punished for calling Geordie's head a literal helmet rack. He strikes a dramatic pose, screaming about how much he has learned from his brother's wisdom today. He tells Hans they must record Geordie's amazing teachings on the highest quality silk so they can preserve them forever. Geordie's face completely twists with absolute rage. Lucian is laughing like a maniac internally, knowing he just made his brother look like a massive clown in front of his entire army. He casually tells Geordie he is leaving now, asking if he has permission to walk away. He leans close, his voice dropping to a sharp whisper. There is no benefit for either of us to stay together, brother. He looks Geordie dead in the eye, reminding him of a very specific detail. Father is currently watching me very closely. He tells him that while a useless recluse like Lucian has absolutely nothing to lose, a high and mighty successor like Geordie has everything to lose if the Grand Duke steps in. He salutes, grabs a terrified Hans, and literally bolts out of the room like a cartoon character. Geordie is left standing there, his body shaking with a level of rage we haven't seen yet. Hendrik cautiously walks up, asking if they should just let him go. Geordie doesn't answer, his eyes burning with a dark, demonic red aura that says everything. Outside the training grounds, the sun is shining through the trees as our duo walks away. Hans looks back at the stone gates, still shaking. He stops, asking if they are really going to be okay. He reminds Lucian that Geordie is not the type of person to let a massive insult like this slide. He screams, crying his signature rivers of tears, convinced that Hendrik is going to kidnap him in the middle of the night and make him disappear. Lucian looks at the crying boy, his face turning serious. He remembers his mercenary days, recalling the absolute nightmare of working under incompetent superiors who made massive mistakes and let their subordinates take the fall. He knows exactly how shitty that feels. He smiles gently, telling Hans that no mere knight would ever dare to touch his personal servant. He puts a hand on the kneeling boy's shoulder, telling him that when a master acts like an idiot, it is always the servants who suffer the most. He acknowledges that Hans has endured absolute hell because of his past weakness. His eyes turn incredibly sharp, glowing with a deep, golden intensity. I will promise you this one thing, Hans. From now on, I will never let my actions cause my people to be looked down upon or tremble in fear. He firmly grasps Hans's hand, cementing a bond of absolute, unbreakable loyalty. Back at the Grand White Mansion, our guy is marching down the hallway with incredibly heavy, furious steps. He is staring at a piece of paper, his face absolutely twisted with rage. After the training grounds incident, he was wondering why things had been so quiet. He should have known that a petty snake like Geordie wouldn't just sit back and take a beating. He is gripping the budget summary paper so hard his knuckles are turning white. Hans is running behind him, matching his master's rage panel for panel. Are you ready, Hans? I'm ready, young master. Lucian screams in absolute raw fury. How dare he touch my allowance? And Hans yells right along with him, screaming about his own personal salary. It all started this morning when Lucian received the official budget report. This was supposed to be the glorious day his account was replenished, allowing him to buy massive amounts of moonlight herb and secure his comfortable retirement. He was smiling like a kid on Christmas morning when he opened the envelope, and then his smile completely died. The report is a literal war crime. Lucian's allowance has been cut by 75% and Hans's salary by 30%. The culprit is incredibly obvious. Geordie used his authority to plant a brand new headmaid in Lucian's annex, and she immediately started redirecting the funds. Embezzlement is a felony that gets you executed even in high noble society, but Geordie was able to pull this off because Lucian's defenses were completely wide open. After Lucian's mother died, the budget was managed by a loyal, older headmaid named Dana. She had stayed by his side for years, keeping the finances perfectly secure, but Geordie fired her, replacing her with a freckled, pink-haired snake. Lucian kicks the doors open, stepping into the grand lobby of his annex. Standing there with a smug, highly disrespectful smile is Jenny, the newly appointed headmaid. She greets him with a mock bow, saying she wanted to introduce herself earlier, but Lucian was too busy playing recluse in his room. She covers her mouth, letting out a condescending giggle as she asks if his long period of wandering is finally over. Hans immediately steps forward, mauling at her disrespectful tone, but Lucian puts up a hand, telling him to calm down. He flashes a bright, friendly smile, saying they should skip the small talk for today. He grips the budget paper, looking at her with calm, steady eyes. He holds the paper right in her face, asking directly if she drafted this masterpiece. Jenny doesn't even flinch. She just lets out a quiet, arrogant scoff. She giggles, admitting that yes, she wrote it, wondering why the young master is making such a big deal out of a simple budget. She claims that since Lucian previously gave full authority to the former head maid, she was simply carrying out her duties. She puts a hand to her chin, smiling like a middle manager who just got her first employee evaluation. She says she is quite perplexed to be interrogated like this when she has worked so diligently, adding that this was originally work Lucian should have been doing himself. Lucian stares at her, knowing exactly what she is trying to do. She is using his past negligence as an excuse to cover her tracks. Fine, I understand that point. It couldn't be helped. He steps closer, his boots clicking heavily against the marble. He points out that according to the report, the majority of the funds were reallocated to raise the salaries of the other maids. But tell me, Jenny, why was Hans's salary cut instead of raised? Don't you think this is a bit too blatant? Jenny's smile doesn't waver. She just shrugs, claiming there must have been an innocent mistake because she has been incredibly overworked. She looks back at the other maids, asking if they can testify to how busy she has been. The other maids stand in the background, sweating in absolute terror. They frantically nod, stuttering out that Miss Jenny has been exceptionally busy lately and that they will assist her even better. Lucian's eyes go cold as ice as he watches this pathetic display of corporate teamwork. He lets out a quiet, dark laugh. He turns on his heel, telling Hans it is time to go back to their quarters. Hans is completely bewildered, asking if they are really just going to let her walk away with this. Lucian stops at the doorway. He looks back over his shoulder, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm whisper. Headmaid, let me ask you one last thing. Do you actually know who the master you are supposed to follow is? Jenny just flashes a smug, victorious grin, whispering that she will make sure to ask Lord Geordie for the answer. Lucian walks out into the courtyard, the evening sky turning a deep, blood-red orange. Tissue that is festered must be cut out for the body to live. And right now, Lucian has decided that his heart is rotting. Night falls over the city. Our duo is wearing dark, hooded cloaks as they walk through a shady, narrow alleyway. Hans is whispering frantically, asking why they are in a place like this when Lucian said they were going fishing. Suddenly, a massive burst of shouting and cheering echoes from behind a heavy wooden door. They step inside to reveal a brutal, underground, illicit fighting arena. Men are screaming, betting their entire salaries on a pair of fighters who are literally beating each other to death's door in a dusty wooden ring. Lucian pulls his hood low, looking around with a terrifying, satisfied grin. This is the perfect place to catch a big fish. He walks up to the bar counter, his boots clicking on the floor. The brown-haired bartender looks at him, sneering as he tells him to scram, because this isn't a place for little kids. Lucian slowly pulls back his hood, revealing his glowing amber eyes and a devilish smirk that says he is about to run this entire place. Why is a gambling den being so picky? What are you doing? Aren't you taking customers? So, we are starting off with our guy explaining exactly why he didn't just kick that annoying spy maid down the stairs right away. Firstly, Jenny is not just some random girl in an apron. She is the daughter of Geordie's personal nanny, meaning she has deep roots in the second Young Masters faction. Secondly, the internal hierarchy in Lucian's own annex is a complete disaster. It is basically a lawless wasteland where the staff has zero respect for their master. So, a simple firing wouldn't fix the underlying rot. He needs a structural solution. And finally, there is no way Grand Duke Sigmund isn't aware of this financial sabotage. In other words, dealing with this snake is part of his father's silent test. Our guy slouches back in a plush leather armchair, looking completely relaxed. He taps a fresh deck of cards on the table, spreading them out in a perfect, elegant arc with a single flick of his wrist. He plans to make some serious capital while setting up his ultimate trap. The table is literally overflowing, with massive stacks of high-value gambling chips. The crowd of rogues in the background is whispering, completely stunned by the blonde kid's luck. His opponent, a seasoned professional, stands up with a pale, sweaty face, announcing his defeat. Lucian flips a single blue chip in the air with a smug, handsome grin. He asks him why he is quitting so early when they were just starting to have some real fun. Hans is standing in the corner, literally pulling his hair out in pure, unadulterated panic. Lucian kicks his boots up on the mahogany table, looking bored out of his mind. He looks around at the crowd of angry, broke thugs. He casually knocks over a massive tower of chips with his foot, mocking the entire establishment for being incredibly soft. Then, the heavy doors at the back of the room slowly creak open. A massive, muscular man steps into the dim light, buttoning his white shirt. He apologizes for his late arrival, his deep voice carrying an immediate physical weight. This is Hugo, the manager of this illegal Underworld arena. He snaps his fingers, his hand moving with a slow, controlled grace. The waiters immediately start bowing, politely telling the other customers that the establishment is closing early today. The crowd quickly scrambles out, knowing exactly what happens when the manager decides to clean house. The massive, rowdy arena empty out in less than a minute. Hugo looks at the blonde kid with a smug, predatory smirk. Lucian just smiles back, realizing the manager has some decent intuition. Hugo sits down across from him, crossing his arms and pretending to be a polite host. He looks at the mountain of chips on Lucian's side of the table and asks if the young lord would mind playing a personal round against him. Lucian tilts his head, flashing a sharp, golden-eyed grin. Hugo laughs, claiming he has picked up a few card tricks during his years running this place. His red eyes flash with a dangerous, icy light. Hans grabs Lucian's shoulder, his voice shaking as he begs him to leave immediately. The servant's survival instincts are screaming, sensing that this giant is on a completely different level from the regular thugs. He looks at Hugo's scarred, smiling face and sees a literal monster. Lucian appreciates the warning, realizing Hans is actually a fantastic judge of character, because he knows exactly who this giant is from his past mercenary days. He looks at Hugo's confident posture. Black Shark Hugo. A man destined to rule the entire underworld of 5 territories, extending his reach to smuggling, gambling, and high-profile contract killings. A literal king of the night who will eventually declare himself a baron and rise to become one of the most feared warlords in the empire. Right now, he is still a rookie manager running a single illegal den, but he is already an absolute monster. And today, our guy came here specifically to put a harpoon through this shark. The dealer lays out 5 cards face down on the polished wood. Hugo suggests a simple card game with absolutely no upper limit on the betting. He smiles, claiming he wants to ensure his esteemed guest doesn't get bored. Lucian's eyes light up. Finally, a man who actually gets me. Hugo looks at him, secretly dismissing him as a typical, arrogant noble brat who relies on his family crest. He thinks he is about to completely fleece this rich kid, using this card game to take every single coin he brought. The dealer places the first card down. Hugo is already imagining how sweet it will taste to devour this carefree noble down to the bone. He lets out a dark, satisfied smile. Then, Lucian casually leans forward, resting his chin on his hand. He tells Hugo he has taken quite a liking to him. He praises his management skills, noting how polite his staff is. You can tell a lot about a boss just by looking at his men. But then, his voice drops to a chillingly calm tone. Tell me, Hugo, running a massive operation like this is hard work. He idly shuffles his cards and delivers a question that stops the giant's heart. When exactly do you plan to begin large-scale production? Hugo's eyes widen, his posture freezing instantly. You know, that thing you are secretly manufacturing in Bestra. The illegal hallucinogens. The room goes completely dead silent. The guards standing at the door are sweating bullets, their eyes wide with fear. Hans looks back and forth, completely lost as to how they went from cards to drug trafficking. Hugo sits like a stone statue, staring blankly at the blonde kid. He tries to put on his smug mask again, asking what on earth he is talking about. Lucian just chuckles, stacking his chips with absolute composure. He reveals the entire conspiracy. Hugo was commissioned by the Marquise Logren family to flood the Valdec territory with highly addictive drugs to weaken their military power. He lets out a disappointed sigh, mocking the Marquise for using such a cheap, predictable plan. He looks right into Hugo's sweating face, warning him that there is a line that should never be crossed. He tells him that carrying out an operation like this in Valdec territory is absolute suicide. Because the second this illegal distribution ring is exposed, every single knight, lord, and guard associated with Valdec will hunt him down and tear him apart. Hugo's mind is currently running a complete system error. His entire secret operation has been completely laid bare by a kid who shouldn't even know his name. In the original timeline, this raid wouldn't happen for another 2 years. The Grand Duke would discover the drugs, send his elite knights, and completely smash this base to pieces. But Hugo would have already fled, escaping justice. The experience of getting screwed over by these guys in the future is actually useful, thinks Jake. Hugo desperately tries to save himself, claiming there is a massive misunderstanding. He acts like a pathetic, lowly merchant who only runs a small shop. He screams that some jealous rival must have spread a false rumor to ruin his business. Lucian just grins. Oh, a false rumor? Then the rice mill you are backing is also just a normal shop? And this underground passage is just a secret escape route? He leans down, his golden eyes burning with a terrifying, predatory light. Hugo's heart drops into his stomach. He realizes that if the kid knows about the secret passage and the fake storefront, excuses are completely useless. His hand slowly slides off the table. His red eyes turn dark, thinking about the ultimate solution. Should I just kill him? Behind Lucian's back, the bartender slowly slides a massive dagger out of his sleeve. A fragile noble brat with absolutely zero guards can be silenced in a single strike. But Lucian doesn't even turn around. He just calmly arranges his chips, telling them to think very carefully before they make a move. Because the chip for this gamble is your own life, Hugo. Hugo's hand freezes midair, a cold sweat breaking out across his neck. He realizes he is being an absolute idiot. Attacking a direct descendant of House Valdek in their own territory means he wouldn't just die. He would spend months begging for death on a torture table. He shuts his eyes tight, his teeth grinding in pure panic. He needs to survive this interaction at all costs. He slides out of his chair, falling heavily to his knees. He drops his forehead flat against the wooden floor, begging for his life. He acknowledges that if Lucian wanted him dead, he would have brought an army of knights instead of coming personally. He screams that if Lucian tells him to be a dog, he will be a dog, crawl on his hands and knees, and bark on command. Every single guard in the room immediately drops to their knees alongside him. They are all bowing to a teenager, like he is their god. Lucian idly plays with a red chip, looking down at the kneeling giant with a cold, unreadable expression. He leans back, admitting that keeping a strong dog by his side isn't a bad idea. He has been needing some competent hands and feet to clean up his annex. But then, he stands up and walks over to the kneeling manager. He tells him that being a simple hunting dog is far too boring for a man of Hugo's talent. He puts a heavy hand on Hugo's shoulder, a bright, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Hey Hugo, don't you want to try becoming a real knight?" Hugo freezes, his red eyes wide with absolute shock. Becoming a knight. It was a dream he had craved like crazy when he was younger. But as a commoner, no matter how hard he trained or how many times he risked his life for his employers, he was always treated as a disposable, third-rate tool. His low berth was a permanent wall he could never climb over. He shuts his mouth tight, a tear rolling down his scarred cheek. He drops his forehead back to the floor, asking with a trembling voice if a low-born monster like him can actually become a noble knight. Lucian looks down at him, his face serious. "I promise you on the honor of the Valdek family, if you possess the integrity and honor to not be ashamed of yourself in the future, mere status will never become a stumbling block." He holds out his hand, asking if he wants to live as a real person, instead of a disposable tool. A few days later, back at the grand, sparkling Valdek Palace, the maids and guards are standing in the main hallway, whispering in absolute confusion. Lucian stands at the head of the long table, introducing his brand new personal assistant, hired from the outside. Our guy is slouching back in his massive gold chair, his boots up on the desk with a smug, victorious grin. Hugo steps forward, looking absolutely terrifying in a sleek, tailored black butler suit, flashing a sharp-toothed smile. "I look forward to working with you, seniors." Back at the annex, our guy is sitting in his study with Hugo and Hans. He has his feet up on the desk like he owns the place, which is a massive power move considering he was a reclusive shut-in 3 days ago. He claps his hands together to get the room's attention. He smiles that beautiful, flowery, noble smile and tells his staff to bring the headmaid Jenny here, right now. The head butler of the annex looks like he just saw a ghost, asking why they would bring her of all people. Lucian just keeps smiling, pointing out that since they have new staff, she should obviously come greet them. The other maids are whispering in the back, terrified because they know Jenny is backed by Jordy's faction. Lucian watches them mutter, reading their faces like an open book. The head butler tells everyone to stay put and not do anything rash, trying to keep his head down and survive. In their eyes, Lucian is still just a fragile little prince, a rotten rope that will snap the second they try to put any weight on it. But Jake is about to teach them a very painful lesson in physics. The butler steps forward, begging the young master to understand their delicate situation. Lucian doesn't even blink, just letting the man dig his own political grave. The butler explains that Jordy pays special attention to the head maid, basically implying Lucian has zero actual power in his own house. The other servants start crying, begging Lucian to just let things go and be understanding. They want to live quietly, even if it means letting Jordy's spy run the place and steal their budget. Hans has absolutely had enough of this cowardly side character behavior. He stands up on a chair, tears streaming down his face, screaming at them to get a grip and remember who the actual master of this annex is. Hugo watches this little guy pop off, looking like a proud older brother. He steps up, flashing a sharp-toothed grin and telling Senior Hans to leave the rest to him. Hugo looks at Lucian, noting that some people are just too stupid to understand polite words. He walks up to the desk, asking for his master's official permission to start the cleaning process. He says drilling loyalty into these trash-tier servants is a very simple task for a guy with his resume, though it might get a little rough for anyone standing too close. Lucian is highly satisfied, thinking that recruiting Hugo before he became a legendary Underworld kingpin was an absolute W. He pats Hugo on the shoulder and gives him the green light to handle the situation. He tells him to go ahead and put on a real show for the audience. Hugo turns around, and the entire atmosphere in the room drops to sub-zero temperatures. The head butler is sweating bullets, realizing Hugo's physical stature is not normal. Up close, this guy doesn't look like a butler. He looks like a raid boss that just entered phase 2. The butler gulps, trying to convince himself that Hugo is just some back alley thug from the slums. He tries to put on a brave face, telling Hugo he should pick the right side before he gets crushed. He asks if Hugo has any idea how cruel Jordy can be, and that the tide turned a long time ago. He tells him not to risk his life for a few cheap pennies. Hugo looks down at him like he's a piece of trash, noting those are some pretty pathetic last words. The butler's brain fails to process the sheer disrespect of a commoner looking down on him. He tries to ask what Hugo means, but a fist moving at Mach 3 interrupts him. The impact is so clean, you can practically hear his teeth leaving his jaw. He gets launched across the entire room, crashing into the wall. Hans's jaw is on the floor, while Lucian is just chilling. Hugo stands over the twitching butler, completely unfazed by his own violence. The butler is laying there, groaning and questioning all of his life choices. The maids start screaming, accusing Hugo of using unnecessary violence in a respectable noble household. Hugo just scoffs, telling them he has more than enough right to do whatever he wants, because his primary specialty is educating arrogant bastards who don't know their place. Meanwhile, a cup of tea sits peacefully on the desk, the complete opposite of the chaos happening in the room. The butler is dragged away, leaving a nice, clean streak on the expensive marble floor. The grand double doors of the annex creak open. Outside, Jenny is being dragged kicking and screaming by 2 of Lucian's loyal guards. She's yelling at them to let her go, completely furious that anyone would dare touch her. The guards tell her to shut her mouth and move, having finally realized who actually pays their salaries. Jenny is losing her mind, screaming about how they dare raise their voices at the head maid. She says they will pay for what they've done, but her eyes go completely wide as she looks inside. The entire annex staff is on their knees, prostrating themselves in absolute terror. The guards report to Lucian, stating they have brought Jenny exactly as ordered. Lucian is standing by the window, his back to them, looking incredibly dramatic under the morning light. He slowly starts to turn around. He puts on his classic, warm, entirely fake smile and welcomes her to his office. He says he only asked them to bring her over politely, but it seems his guards were a bit too enthusiastic. Jenny is grinding her teeth, looking like a feral cat that just got cornered by a predator. She demands to know the meaning of this, asking if he really thinks he can get away with treating her like this. She screams that if he thought she'd be scared, he's sorely mistaken, because Jordy will never let this stand. Lucian's smile slowly fades into a cold, dead stare, as he asks who said anything about letting her walk away. He reaches onto his desk and picks up a thick, multi-tailed leather whip. Jenny's smugness instantly evaporates, her eyes widening in pure confusion. Lucian looks at her with completely dead eyes and tells her that today, she is going to die right here. The chapter opens with the image of a massive guillotine under a burning sunset sky. Execution has always been the most efficient way to send a warning to the masses. It doesn't need to be fair, and it doesn't need to be subtle. It just needs to leave a permanent, bloody impression on anyone watching so they never step out of line again. Lucian slowly walks toward Jenny, the leather whip trailing on the ground behind him. He doesn't need to restructure the entire house, he just needs to make an absolute example out of her. Jenny is sweating, staring at his face, trying to find a single trace of the weak prince she used to bully. Lucian wants to make sure the Grand Duke knows the useless, trashy third prince no longer exists. He snaps his finger, signaling his bodyguard. Hugo immediately grabs Jenny by the shoulder and shoves her down. She hits the floor hard, her knees slamming against the cold marble. She looks up, terrified. But her arrogant brain is still trying to find a way to bluff. She tells Lucian he should think this through carefully before he does something he'll regret. She reminds him that her mother is Jordy's wet nurse, which technically makes her Jordy's sibling. She actually thinks this weak family connection is her ultimate cheat code. Lucian just sighs, looking at her like she's a particularly disappointing bug. He asks if bringing up her brother while she's on her knees is really the best she can do. He tells her if she has any actual final words, she should say them now, before things get messy. Jenny's voice cracks, her confidence rapidly turning into pure panic. Lucian leans down, listing her actual crimes, embezzlement, insulting a noble, and complete neglect of duty. He asks if she honestly believes a mere wet nurse's child has the authority to steal from a Valdec. He says at most, Jordy would get scolded a few times, and if their father steps in, Jordy won't even be able to do that. In fact, the Grand Duke might actually reward Lucian for cleaning up Jordy's garbage. Jordy is just one of many heirs, a competitor in a brutal succession war, just like the person standing right in front of her. He reminds her that he already gave her a chance to cooperate, but she chose the hard way. Her hands are bound tightly behind her back, leaving her completely helpless. Jenny finally breaks, sobbing and begging the young master for forgiveness. Lucian's expression remains completely cold, devoid of any mercy. He raises the whip and tells her to blame her own terrible luck for crossing him. The whip strikes, and the scream that follows echoes all the way down the hall. Meanwhile, outside the main estate, the sun is shining brightly on the grand palace. Geordie is running down the stone steps like his house is on fire, his face pale. He's sweating, muttering that this absolute madness cannot be happening. He remembers Lucian as the weakling who backed down a few days ago, and now he's suddenly purging his spies. He realizes something is deeply wrong with his little brother, and his network is crumbling. He had servants posted specifically to keep Lucian in his place, but they all got cleared out instantly. Geordie reaches the double doors, his eyes wide, with a mix of anger and sudden fear. He realizes Lucian has completely taken control of the annex staff. His guards try to reassure him, saying the report must be some kind of mistake. They say a coward like Lucian would never dare touch anyone, but another horrific scream cuts them off. Geordie kicks the doors open with a massive crash, the sound echoing through the grand hall. Inside, the floor is stained with blood, and Hugo is holding a battered, weeping Jenny. Lucian is standing over them, holding the bloody whip, looking entirely unbothered. Geordie's eyes go wide with pure, unadulterated rage. He screams, demanding to know what the hell Lucian is doing. But Lucian just calmly greets his esteemed brother. He smiles and says he's a bit busy right now, so Geordie should come back later. He tells Hugo to put Jenny back on her feet so they can finish the punishment. Geordie loses his mind and orders his elite guards, Oliver and Gert, to save Jenny immediately. The two guards leap forward, drawing their weapons to rush Hugo. Lucian's smile doesn't even waver. He simply calls Hugo's name. He orders Hugo to slash Jenny's throat if anyone steps within 3 feet of them. He says he will take full responsibility for her death under the laws of the house. The guards freeze in midair, completely paralyzed by the sheer coldness of his voice. Hugo draws his dagger and presses it against Jenny's neck, ready to slide it home on command. Jenny is crying hysterically, staring at Geordie and begging him to save her life. Geordie screams at Hugo, asking how a commoner dares to disobey a direct order from a Valdec heir. He threatens to execute Hugo's entire family and hang their heads from the city walls. Hugo doesn't even blink, his face completely calm. He looks Geordie dead in the eye and says his only master is Lord Lucian. Any order not given by Lucian means absolutely nothing to him, regardless of who is shouting it. Geordie is shaking with rage, his fists clenching so hard his knuckles are turning white. He demands to know what Jenny did to deserve being treated like a common criminal. Lucian smiles gently, stating she insulted her superior, defied direct orders, and siphoned his funds. He looks at Geordie with absolute contempt, asking if his big brother genuinely doesn't understand the difference between official duty and personal emotion. So, we pick up right back in the grand halls of House Valdec. The succession war between the first young master Tristan and our second young master Geordie is currently at a boiling point. Up until now, Geordie has been playing the long game, slowly solidifying his political foundation to ensure he takes the throne. But then our guy Lucian stepped in and completely ruined his perfect record, humiliating his knight and purging his spy network in the annex. And now, if Geordie fails to protect Jenny, his absolute right-hand tool in the annex, it's a complete wrap for his reputation. His own followers are watching him right now in absolute silence, waiting to see if he folds. If he lets her get slaughtered here, the trust in his faction is going to crack like cheap glass. So, realizing he's completely cornered, Geordie clenches his fist and tells Lucian that he wins, ordering him to let her go. His guards instantly drop their shoulders, sweating like they just survived a high-tier dungeon boss. Even Hans is standing in the back, with his mouth wide open, completely shocked that the arrogant second prince actually folded. But Hugo doesn't even move the blade from Jenny's neck, keeping his cold crimson stare locked on them. Because in Hugo's world, there is only one person who gets to say when the show is over. Lucian slowly turns around with a sinister smile, asking Geordie if he really thinks he can just sweep this under the rug with a single word. Especially after she spent months siphoning off his precious resources and treating his annex like a personal piggy bank. He looks Geordie dead in the eye, thinking that nobles really believe their golden tongues can solve any crisis. He puts on his most dramatic noble face, shrugging his shoulders like he's completely offended by the term win. He says he was simply fulfilling his basic duties as the third young master by punishing a common thief, which is a crime regardless of status. He walks past the trembling maids, asking what the other servants would think if he just let an embezzler walk free. He leans in close to Geordie, whispering that since his respected older brother is begging so nicely, he wants to drop the matter. But he flashes a grin that is purely villainous. He says he simply lacks any legal justification to let her go without a proper trial. Geordi is practically vibrating with rage, telling Lucian to stop talking in circles and state his price. Lucian taps the whip against his hand, noting that since ancient times, property damage has always had a very specific legal remedy. Specifically, coughing up several times the stolen amount to make the problem magically disappear. Our guy shifts into full pay-pig mode, smiling brightly as imaginary gold coins fall around him, asking Geordi exactly how much his precious maid's life is worth. And just like that, the immediate crisis in the annex is settled through some high society extortion. Later, we cut to the main estate's study, where the sun is pouring through the massive stained glass windows. Grand Duke Sigmund is standing by the window, looking out over his territory. Edwin is standing behind him, giving his official daily report on the situation. Sigmund looks over the papers, his face completely unreadable. He asks his head butler if the reports about the annex are actually true. Edwin smiles politely, confirming he personally went over the details. He explains that Geordi actually paid Lucian 10 times the embezzled amount just to get Jenny back in one piece. And on top of that, Lucian has hired a massive underworld figure named Hugo to completely run security in his annex, meaning the third young master's territory is now locked down tighter than the imperial treasury. Sigmund looks at his own reflection in the window, a small, proud smirk crossing his face. It seems the useless trash son is finally starting to act like a real Valdek. The massive wooden doors of the study click open. Lucian walks in with perfect noble posture, saluting his father politely. Sigmund turns his head, his sharp golden eyes locking onto his son. The silence in the room is heavy enough to crush a normal person. Lucian instantly notices the shift, thinking that Sigmund's gaze feels entirely different from their first meeting. Sigmund notes that Lucian has been causing quite a stir around the estate recently. Lucian just smiles placidly, saying it was nothing grand, just some basic discipline for servants who forgot who their master was. Sigmund taps his finger against the armrest, pointing out that Lucian's little show completely disgraced his older brother. He warns him that Geordi is not the type to forget an insult, asking if Lucian is truly ready to handle the backlash. Lucian doesn't even hesitate, stating there is absolutely nothing to handle. He says it was simply a matter of setting the family hierarchy straight, nothing more. He shines with pure main character energy, asking how he could ever dare call himself a Valdek if he let fear of backlash stop him from doing his duty. He says he simply made a choice that wouldn't bring shame to the family crest. Sigmund closes his eyes, letting out a small, amused chuckle. He tells Lucian that if Geordi continues to pick fights with him, he has full permission to strike back, which sounds like a W. But in this house, nothing is ever that simple. Sigmund's voice drops, warning him that if the sibling rivalry escalates to the point of actually harming the family's standing, he will side with Geordi, regardless of who is actually right or wrong. Lucian's jaw drops. He asks what on earth his father is talking about. Sigmund looks at him coldly, asking why he's so surprised. He points out that while Geordi is hasty, his actual contributions to the family over the years are massive, unlike Lucian, who spent a whole year locking himself in a room. To a warlord like Sigmund, choosing the asset that actually produces results is just basic logic. Lucian touches his chin, his mercenary brain instantly analyzing the hidden meaning behind those words. He realizes this isn't a threat, it's a direct invitation to trample over his brother and prove he's the stronger predator. Sigmund tells him to build his strength and become an actual asset to the family first. Only then will he get the answers he's looking for. Lucian smiles inwardly, realizing the Grand Duke is deliberately using the threat of Geordi to force him to grow faster. And if he's being this obvious about it, it means the official succession battle is going to start very soon, which is exactly what our guy wanted from the start. He thinks that noble fathers really are built different, but since Sigmund is worrying about him so much, he reaches into his jacket and pulls out a thick envelope. He calls out to his father, stopping him in his tracks. He slams the document onto the desk, asking what Sigmund will do if he has already prepared his first major move. He looks up with a confident, wild grin, declaring that it's a very big move indeed. Sigmund stands over his desk, looking down at the document Lucian just presented. His veins pop as his grip tightens on the paper, the sheer force of his hand wrinkling the edges. He looks up, asking with absolute seriousness if this report is actually accurate. He warns Lucian that if he's exaggerating the details just to look good, he needs to speak up now. Lucian calmly replies, it contains nothing but the cold truth. He explains that by following the trail, he has successfully secured the insider who has been distributing illegal drugs in Valdek territory on the orders of House Logren. Sigmund's rage flares instantly, a massive wave of blue-white mana erupting from his body like a volcanic blast. He stands surrounded by roaring flames of energy, cursing the Marquise's son, Bernhardt, for daring to defile his land. His eyes glow with pure, unadulterated killing intent. Lucian is sweating under the pressure, thinking that this is indeed the legendary warlord who protects the empire. He gulps, realizing that if he doesn't calm his father down, the mana pressure might actually crush him first. He politely asks if he can add one more detail to the report. He points out that even if they report this directly to the Emperor, House Logan will simply cut off their subordinate guild to escape responsibility, because on the surface, they used minor merchants to distribute the drugs, leaving zero direct evidence pointing to the Marquise. Sigmund's eye narrows as he listens, genuinely shocked by how sharp his son's political instincts have suddenly become. Lucian notes that if they handle this through normal channels, the enemy will only suffer a minor financial loss. We see a white chess piece smashing a black king. Lucian asks if they shouldn't at least take an arm in return for this insult. The office falls silent as the dust settles from Sigmund's outburst. Sigmund slowly sits back down in his massive chair, his anger replacing itself with cold curiosity. He demands an explanation, asking what kind of plan Lucian has in mind. Lucian says he has already secured a way to ensure the Logan family cannot escape the trap. He explains that he recently recruited a major executive from the drug operation, who surrendered to him completely. Sigmund instantly connects the dots, recalling Edwin's report about the thug named Hugo. He realizes Lucian didn't just hire a bodyguard. He planned this entire political checkmate the moment he walked into that gambling den. His fingers tap against the dark wood of his desk. He asks if Lucian intends to use the traitor to set a countertrap, and Lucian confirms that Logan will never suspect their own executive has flipped. He says he has already made arrangements to make the enemy believe everything is going smoothly, which will force a high-ranking Logan noble to show up personally to collect the profits. Sigmund acknowledges that the strategy is incredibly solid, but he points out a massive flaw in his son's logic. He says Lucian is betting the entire future of the house on a single variable, a rat from the back alleys who has already betrayed his first master. He warns him that human nature cannot be changed, and trying to walk a path with someone who cannot be trusted will only lead to a knife in the back. Lucian just grins, his mercenary soul completely disagreeing with this traditional noble view on loyalty. He says he isn't trusting the man himself, he is betting on the specific desire that the man possesses. He turns around, explaining that Hugo doesn't care about money or simple survival anymore. We see Hugo looking back, his eyes burning with green ambition. Lucian says Hugo wants to become a knight and carve his name into history, which is a dream a man will gladly die for. He turns back to Sigmund with a brilliant starry background, saying he will believe in that dream, just as he did in his past life. Sigmund calls that a sentimental and naive reason to risk their safety. He asks what Lucian will do if the thug fails and ruins everything. Lucian calmly states he has no intention of escaping responsibility. He looks his father dead in the eye, stating he will pay the price with his own neck if his subordinate fails. Sigmund stares at him in absolute silence, realizing his son is no longer playing games. He sits back, telling Lucian that once his physical training is complete, he must report to the Grand Training Grounds. He declares that he will personally teach him the family's secret Lionheart sword, officially recognizing him as a candidate for the succession. Outside, the grand towers of Kelheim shine under the afternoon sun, the political landscape of the estate shifting in an instant. Later that night, the moon rises over the quiet corridors of the castle. Candles flicker in the massive private library. Sigmund is reading a book, while Edwin stands behind him in the shadows. Edwin bows deeply, expressing his absolute shame for failing to notice the Logan conspiracy happening right under their noses. Sigmund closes his book with a heavy snap, telling him to stop. He says he was the one who sent Edwin to handle the border issues, and he knows Edwin is already working past his physical limits. Edwin notes that Lucian finding the conspiracy first was a complete miracle, considering how much effort the enemy put into hiding it. He explains that the Logan family wasn't after money. They wanted to ruin House Valdec's honor to gain leverage with the Emperor. Sigmund scoffs at the Marquise's petty greed, before asking what kind of man Hugo actually is to align himself with Lucian. Edwin explains that on the surface, Hugo was just a gambling den boss, but in reality, he managed a rising syndicate that even the major underworld families feared. He smiles warmly, noting that Hugo is not the type of beast to serve under anyone, making Lucian's ability to tame him truly surprising. Sigmund walks through the dark library, muttering about his son's sudden growth. His golden eye glints in the candlelight. He knows that a man who survived the brutal underworld wouldn't be fooled by empty, noble speeches. Hugo must have seen something in Lucian that made him realize this kid was a leader worth dying for. A single, brilliant star shining in the dark. A true master worth staking his life on. Sigmund decides that since Lucian has proven his teeth, it is time to open the path for him. He tells Edwin that starting tomorrow, they will begin teaching Lucian the secret family arts, prompting Edwin to ask who the swordsmanship teacher will be. Sigmund smiles coldly, stating he will break the retirement of the legendary Sir Eisen. Edwin is sweating instantly. Deep in the dark forest, a massive pillar of blue mana shoots directly into the night sky over a quiet lake. The legendary warrior sits in deep meditation, his colossal greatsword resting in front of him, preparing for the arrival of his new student. Night falls over the Grand Valdec estate, but inside the annex, the peace is shattered by a sudden scream. A voice echoes through the hallways, filled with pure, unadulterated shock. It is our boy Hans, staring at Lucian, with his eyes practically popping out of his skull. He grabs his master's face, begging him to confirm if he really just became an official candidate for the successor of the house. Lucian looks slightly annoyed, asking Hans how many times he has to say yes before he actually believes him. He can't even move, because Hans is clinging to him like a wet blanket, so he calls over his secret weapon. Hugo steps in, easily lifting Hans off his master with a single hand, addressing him as senior. He calmly explains that, given the young master's terrifying qualities, this was always the natural path for him, and he adds that it won't do for a senior, who is Lucian's right-hand man, to be this shaken up over a simple promotion. Hans instantly freezes, his brain processing the words right-hand man like a system reboot. His eyes go wide. A massive, sparkly smile slowly spreads across his face. He instantly crosses his arms, blushing, and says that while he has indeed served the young master the longest, he still has so much to learn. Hugo picks him up like a toddler, and Hans starts calling him Left-Hand Junior Hugo, completely lost in his own newly inflated ego. Lucian watches this happen in real time, realizing that experienced Underworld hires are just built different when it comes to employee management. He tells both of them to pay attention, explaining why he wanted to tell only them before the news spreads to the rest of the family. In his mind, he is already mapping out their entire career paths. He knows Hans is naturally timid, and his fragile nature could easily become a massive liability in a real fight. But the kid has one massive advantage. He actually cares for Lucian, and he has the grit to stay by his side, even when things go completely south. If Hans gains some real experience and manages internal affairs, he will become the most reliable support player on the team. And as for Hugo, his raw combat talent is already elite. He just needs to open the path for Hugo to become an official knight to draw out his abilities to their absolute limit. In a succession war, a couple of highly invested elite allies are worth more than 1,000 cheap mercenaries. He smiles, telling them that the schedule is going to get incredibly busy from now on, because the road ahead is a brutal journey that he absolutely cannot navigate alone. And he can only complete this game if they are standing by his side. Hugo clenches his fist, his red eyes burning, as he promises never to disappoint his young lord. And Hans is practically glowing, screaming at the young master to leave everything to them. The next day, the sun rises over the grand outdoor training grounds of House Valdec. The stone stairs are completely empty, but a fire is already crackling in the hearths. Lucian is standing in the center of the ring, wearing a dark burgundy training uniform. He closes his eyes, letting his mind drift back to his past life as Jake. In his previous life, he spent decades scouring every single corner of the continent for one thing: the ancient essence of the ancestors' martial arts, the legendary secret styles that are supposed to elevate your sword to a divine level, specifically the real sword forms. And above regular forms, there is a legendary level that is considered a complete cheat code: the advanced sword forms. But after surviving like a wild dog for years, the only thing he actually got his hands on was a degraded, trash tier version used by apprentice knights to guard city gates. Because in this world, knowledge is a resource kept locked behind massive noble family gates. For a mere commoner mercenary like him, even getting a chance to read a basic manual was considered heavenly luck, while highborn nobles, who couldn't even swing a blade, properly easily learned high-ranking forms and completely overwhelmed his squad on the battlefield. Every single time he lost a teammate because of that genetic gap, his thirst for real power grew. He clenches his fist in the present. But now, an unexpected opportunity has literally landed in his lap. A legendary secret style reserved only for the elite heirs of House Valdec. The chance to learn the fabled Lionheart sword, a style that makes advanced forms look like child's play. He is so hyped his hand is literally shaking with excitement. Then he freezes, realizing he's acting completely out of character. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm his heart before the teacher actually arrives. The scheduled time for the lesson is still a while away, but he was so excited that he has been pacing around this empty courtyard since the crack of dawn. In his past life, he learned everything by stealing techniques and picking up scraps of knowledge, meaning he never had a real master to guide him. A small, genuine smile crosses his face. He sits down on the stone floor, realizing that living a second life really is something special. He closes his eyes and begins to circulate his mana to calm his thoughts. Up on the balcony above, a massive shadow falls over the stone railing. An old man is standing there, silently watching the boy meditate in the center of the ring. He strokes his silver beard, noting that a considerable amount of time has passed, but the kid hasn't moved a single inch. He He looks at Lucian, realizing there is absolutely no trace of the weak, fragile child he remembers from a few years ago. We see a flashback to the previous night, where Grand Duke Sigmund asked this old man to become Lucian's personal teacher. Sigmund had admitted over a glass of wine that he originally thought the boy was a complete lost cause. But after watching his recent moves, there are aspects about him that are impossible to ignore. He told the master that training Lucian would at least serve as some decent entertainment for his retirement. The old man notes that if Sigmund is praising him this much, the boy's talent must be highly unusual. Sigmund just smirks. He says it isn't just about his raw talent. His actual mindset is what caught him completely off guard. And he promises the master that he will understand the second he sees the boy in person. Back in the present, the old man looks down with a sharp, green gaze. This is Eisenbreitner, the legendary sword saint of the Empire. To understand why this is a big deal, you need to understand what a sword saint actually is. They are superhumans who have reached the absolute peak of mana circulation, basically gods among swordsmen. And Lucian opens his eyes to find this exact legend walking down the stairs toward him. His jaw drops, his mercenary instincts screaming that a literal cheat code is standing right in front of him. Sir Eisenbreitner, the strongest swordsman of the previous generation, stands before him. He salutes Lucian politely, noting that he hasn't seen the third young master since the Grand Duke's birthday party years ago. He announces that he will be the one in charge of his training starting today. Lucian is internally screaming, cursing Hans for telling him he'd be learning from an old family knight. How do you leave out the tiny, minor detail that the old knight is a literal sword saint? He quickly composes himself, bowing deeply and stating it is an absolute honor to receive his guidance. Eisen let out a soft laugh, saying he is nothing more than an old man hiding behind an undeserved title. He asks Lucian why a proud successor candidate of House Valdek would bow his head so easily to a servant. Lucian looks up, his golden eyes completely serious. He says that while he cannot lower the status of his family, neglecting to show proper respect to a legendary master would be a disgrace. Eisen's eye twitches, completely caught off guard by the boy's glittering, sparkly-eyed respect. He smiles warmly, telling Lucian to do whatever makes him feel comfortable. He says they should begin their training immediately, and he asks if the third young master would mind starting by running laps around the outdoor training grounds. Lucian drops into a starting stance so fast the dust flies. He looks up at Eisen, asking if he should start running right now. Eisen is startled, holding up his hands and telling him to wait a second. He asks Lucian if he has any questions about why he's running, or how many laps he has to do. Lucian just smiles, saying there must be a very good reason why the master didn't feel the need to explain. He says a student receiving teachings simply follows his master's words without hesitation. Eisen stares at him, his gaze turning incredibly sharp as he realizes Lucian's attitude is entirely different from the other arrogant young masters. This child has a pure, unyielding longing for the sword, and he finally understands what Sigmund meant. He tells him to go ahead, and Lucian dashes off like a bullet. He flies down the steps, entering the massive running track. Eisen watches him go, his arms crossed behind his back. Lucian keeps his pace steady, his golden eyes locked forward. His boots strike the dirt in a perfect, rhythmic beat. In reality, there is a very specific reason why he followed the order without a single word of complaint. Because his mercenary brain instantly figured out the true purpose of this run. It is a classic test to measure a disciple's raw qualifications and attitude. In other words, gauging his potential. He used to use this exact same method back when he was a mercenary captain. When you assign a completely trivial, boring task to a rookie, their immediate reaction and attitude tell you everything you need to know about them. Lucian keeps pushing his speed, his blonde hair whipping in the wind. He glares back at the old master standing on the steps. He knows he already showed his mental resolve with his polite answer. So now, only one thing remains to secure the Sword Saint's trust. Tenacity, he resolves to run until his body literally passes out. But 1 hour later, Lucian's eyes go wide, in complete confusion. He stares at his own hands, thinking that something is seriously wrong with his body. He has been running like a complete madman for 60 minutes straight, but he doesn't feel tired at all. In fact, the more he runs, the lighter his body feels. He remembers all he did to recover this fragile body was drink his bootleg mass-produced nectar and take short walks. So how is this cardio possible? He rounds the corner, passing the stairs where Eisen is standing. Eisen is staring at him, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He only ordered the run to check the boy's general physical state, expecting him to collapse within 10 minutes. But this completely defies all logical laws of physics. Not a single drop of sweat is flowing from Lucian's body, and his breathing is as calm as a silent lake. Even for an elite knight who has trained their mana for decades, maintaining this level of perfect stamina is extremely difficult. He looks at the boy, realizing the impossible truth. He walks down the steps, his boots tapping against the stone. He calls out to Lucian, telling him to stop and end the run here. Lucian skids to a halt, completely fresh, asking if something happened. Eisen looks at him, a massive, glowing blue mana pressure erupting from his old body. He says he has a very important question for the third young master. He asks if the action Lucian took this morning to calm his mind was actually circulation, not simple meditation. Lucian looks at him calmly, realizing his secret is already out. He nods, admitting that he indeed performed circulation, because there is nothing better for clearing one's thoughts. Aizen's face goes completely stiff, realizing his wildest guess was actually correct. He steps forward, asking for permission to examine the boy's physical condition for a moment. He tells Lucian to stay completely still, even if he feels something strange entering his body. He grabs Lucian's wrist, channeling his pure blue mana directly into his pathways. His green eyes narrow as the energy flows. His face freezes in sheer, unadulterated shock. He had his suspicions, but Lucian hasn't just mastered basic circulation. He has already reached the absolute end of the standard circulation path, a realm that should be physically impossible for a teenager. And as the blue energy surges around them, Aizen realizes this child is opening a completely new, unprecedented path of power that goes far beyond anything the Sword Saint himself has ever achieved. Sir Aizen stands in the center of the grand training grounds, his hand on Lucian's wrist. He slowly releases his grip, his green eyes wide with sheer disbelief. He looks down at his own hand, his mind failing to process the physical data he just gathered. He asks his student with absolute seriousness, since when his body has been in this state. He demands to know when exactly Lucian reached the absolute end of mana circulation. Lucian plays dumb, asking what the master means by reaching the end. Aizen explains that when he channeled his mana, he found Lucian's energy was as pure as freshly fallen snow, and his internal pathways are shaped in a perfect, continuous loop that maximizes mana efficiency to the absolute limit, just like a water wheel. He says, this is a realm that only a tiny minority of martial artists can hope to reach after a lifetime of constant grind. He knew Lucian was talented, but this is a state close to absolute physical perfection. Lucian realizes there is no point in trying to hide his cheat codes from a literal sword saint. Unless his master is at that level, his body's unique state is a mystery no one else can properly analyze anyway. So, he decides to drop the act and speak plainly. He admits that it has only been about a month since he started circulating his mana. And he adds, very casually, that all his pathways were completely open from the start, with zero blockages or pain. Aizen is left standing in silence, thinking that the boy far exceeds even his wildest expectations. He looks down at their shadows on the stone floor, his expression turning incredibly solemn. He looks up and asks Lucian a question, even at the risk of showing extreme disrespect to the Grand Duke. He asks if Lucian would be willing to give up his position as a successor candidate of House Valdek. The sky above is completely clear, but the weight of that question makes the air feel incredibly heavy. Lucian is startled, asking why the master would suddenly ask him to abandon the succession war. He starts checking his own chest, wondering if his bootleg nectar has some terrible side effect that will blow him up if he uses mana. But Aizen, shaking his head, tells him he's completely off the mark. He tells Lucian that his body is actually the ultimate, ideal vessel for swordsmanship. He doesn't just possess maximum physical and mana efficiency, he has the potential to see beyond the human limit. In other words, if Lucian abandons his family politics and focuses solely on the sword, becoming the next sword saint will be an absolute walk in the park for him. Lucian's eyes go wide as the words sink in. In his past life, he spent decades fighting like a dog, just to learn basic forms. He looked up at the mountains, dreaming of the day he could stand among the martial elite. And now, the pinnacle of the sword, a realm he could only dream of, is being handed to him on a silver platter. He looks down at his hands, his heart beating in his chest, to see beyond the limit and reach the absolute summit of martial power. But he asks if there is a specific reason why he has to choose between the two paths. Aizen looks at him with a sad, tired expression. He admits that the catch is simple. He doesn't have enough time left. He is nearly 100 years old, and while his mana keeps him moving, his body is slowly giving up to old age. Even if Lucian focuses every single hour of his day on the sword, passing down his entire legacy before he dies will be a tight schedule. Lucian lowers his head, remembering a crucial detail from his past life. The Sword Saint is destined to pass away in exactly 8 years. Ideally, his mercenary soul wants to take the offer, lock himself in a room, and grind swordsmanship to the peak. But he knows the future, the chaotic, apocalyptic war that is coming to tear the Empire apart. And in that bloody future, pure physical strength alone cannot save his people. He needs the political legitimacy, authority, and resources of House Valdek. He clenches his fist, making a painful but necessary executive decision. He bows politely, telling Sir Aizen that he wishes to remain a Valdek to the very end. He thanks him for the legendary offer, but states he cannot accept it. Aizen lets out a soft sigh, saying it is he who should be ashamed for putting the young master in such a difficult position. He looks down at his boots, muttering that old age must be making him greedy. He realizes he was simply trying to leave a piece of his own legacy in this world before he passes on. Lucian looks at the old master's back, a clever mercenary plan already forming in his mind. His lips curl into a confident, sly smile. He asks Sir Aizen what he would do if Lucian could find him another monstrously talented disciple, a raw genius who can easily inherit his legacy and reach the peak of the sword. Aizen is taken aback, while the wind sweeps through the quiet training grounds. Meanwhile, on the other side of the estate, we cut to the equestrian training field. A horse's hooves kick up dirt as it gallops across the arena. Leaping cleanly over a high wooden fence is a young boy with messy, spiky, peach blonde hair. As he lands, his personal butler comes running across the dirt road, sweating and waving his his hands. The butler gasps for air, reporting that the ridiculous rumors about the third young master have been officially confirmed. The horse rears back, letting out a loud neigh as the boy pulls the reins. The boy looks back with an irritated frown. This is House Valdek's fourth young master, Joshua Valdek, and he is not happy. He leaps down from his horse, his yellow gold eyes narrowed in pure annoyance. The butler explains that the Grand Duke has indeed included the reclusive Lucian in the line of succession, and, on top of that, he is currently receiving personal swordsmanship training from the legendary Sword Saint Eisen. Joshua is absolutely fuming, calling his older brother a constant stumbling block. He screams that it's already hard enough to build his own support base while being squeezed by his two older brothers, Tristan and Jordy. He whips his riding crop against the air, throwing a complete temper tantrum. He demands to know why Lucian couldn't just stay quiet and rot in the corner of his room like a good little recluse. The butler warns him to watch his words, but Joshua is too angry to care about noble etiquette. He says his blood boils, just having to call someone who is only a few months older than him, brother. He bites his glove, his mind racing, as he refuses to sit back and watch Lucian steal his spotlight. His yellow eyes flash with a sinister light as a plan forms in his mind. He turns back to his butler, pointing out that since Lucian has started learning the sword, he will surely need a sparring partner. The butler looks nervous as Joshua delivers a chilling order. He tells him to prepare 2 sharp swords, specifically live steel blades, built for real, bloody combat. He smirks, resolving to teach the weak third prince that absolutely nothing has changed. Back at the Grand Training Grounds, Lucian is still explaining his logic to Sir Eisen. He says that while it may take some time to locate this talented individual, they are the only ones who can make up for his own delay. Eisen looks at him with a skeptical expression, asking if Lucian really believes there is a monster out there capable of leaving a scar on a sword saint, a genius whose name will echo across the Empire, even 100 years from now. He stands in silence, his silver beard twitching. He admits his heart feels heavy, feeling like he is placing a massive burden on the young master's shoulders. But he smiles gently, stating he is content enough just knowing Lucian respects this old man so deeply. Lucian salutes him, while Eisen turns to prepare the training gear. Lucian looks down at his boots, realizing the master clearly thinks he's talking absolute nonsense. Which is fair, considering a kid who just started learning the sword is promising to recruit a legendary monster as his disciple. But our guy's face turns serious. His lips curl into a dark, knowing smile, thinking that the master can definitely look forward to it. Because if Lucian was sent by heaven to shake up this world, then heaven must have sent someone else to stand as his equal. A man whose raw talent alone is so monstrous that his blade will sweep across every single battlefield of the coming war. We see a projection of a purple-haired warrior cleanly slicing through heavily armored Imperial knights. The impact is so violent, the snow blasts into the air. The steel meets flesh, and the blood splatters across the white ground. The knights collapse in heaps before the purple-haired demon's absolute speed. The warrior stands amidst the mountain of corpses, his dark sword dripping with blood. This is Felix, the future sword demon, and Lucian is going to ensure he becomes his strongest follower, and the perfect disciple to inherit everything the Sword Saint has to offer. Back in the present, Eisen stands next to a wooden training dummy. He says that before they begin the actual lesson, he needs to see how much Lucian has achieved on his own. He orders him to perform vertical, horizontal, and diagonal strikes against the dummy. And if he has indeed mastered basic circulation, he should end with an attack fully imbued with mana. Lucian grips the wooden practice sword, his calloused fingers wrapping around the handle. He realizes this is his very first time holding a real sword with Lucian's physical body. He drops into a low combat stance, his golden eyes narrowing as his focus sharpens. He takes a deep breath, preparing to launch his first strike. The wooden blade cuts through the air with a loud whistle, landing a perfect vertical strike. He instantly pivots, the second strike cutting horizontally with a heavy impact. He spins on his heel, his blade flashing in a clean diagonal slash. And finally, he prepares his mana for the final blow. The blue energy surges from his hand, coating the wooden sword in a bright, crackling aura. His golden eye flashes as he unleashes the final strike. The impact is so violent, it shatters the air, the wind blasting across the training grounds. The wooden pieces of the dummy fly across the stone courtyard. The armored chestplate of the dummy hits the floor with a heavy crash. Lucian stands in his follow-through pose, the dust settling around him. He thinks his movements were a bit clunky, but wonders if the master will find it decent for a noble beginner. He lowers his sword, waiting for Sir Eisen's feedback. Eisen stands in silence, his expression completely blank. He smiles gently, admitting he knew the young master had talent, but once again, Lucian surprised him. But then, his smile vanishes, stating flatly that the display was, to put it simply, completely pathetic. Lucian's funny cat face / shocked chibi expression. Lucian is stunned, asking the master what on earth he means. Eisen walks forward, stating that bad habits fill every single swing of his sword. He says Lucian's style resembles a desperate mercenary, ignoring all basic fundamentals and struggling desperately just to survive. By focusing purely on raw power and speed, he broke the balance between his physical body and his mana. And because of those gaps, his sharp blade becomes blunt, leaving massive openings in his defense. Eisen asks how long it took Lucian to channel his mana, And Lucian replies, "It took about 1 to 2 seconds." Aizen's face turns cold as those words sink in. A close-up of Lucian's golden eye shows his pupil dilating. Before he can even process the movement, Sir Aizen's wooden blade is already resting directly against his neck. Aizen tells him that those 1 to 2 seconds are more than enough time for an experienced enemy to take his head. He says this lesson should have started with understanding the absolute weight of a single second on the battlefield. Lucian breaks out in a cold sweat, staring at the wooden blade pressed against his throat. His mercenary soul has a sudden, brutal reality check. He remembers his previous life, where he died without even realizing his head had been severed by Crawford's elite speed. He lowers his head, admitting his absolute arrogance, and promising to fix his bad habits from the ground up. Aizen looks at him, pleased by the boy's instant humility and willingness to learn. He walks back, explaining that physical strength alone cannot defeat an experienced mana user. To draw out the true power of the sword, his physical body and his mana must form a single, synchronized flow. He demonstrates a bright green mana coating his sword as he swings with effortless grace. The blade passes through the second reinforced dummy without a single sound. The air splits as the wind blasts outward, and the massive dummy explodes into neat halves, the shock traveling through the floor. Aizen turns back, telling Lucian that this is the true path of the sword he must walk from now on. A few days later, the training grounds are quiet, the sun is shining, and everything looks peaceful. But then 2 pieces of wood immediately crash together in the center of the yard. Our boy Lucian is trading high-speed blows with Sir Aizen, the actual living legend of the sword. Aizen is coaching him mid-swing, reminding him that the flow of mana is not something you can just turn on and off whenever it is convenient. Just like physical training builds muscle memory, your mana control has to reach a level where it operates on pure instinct. While you are using energy to reinforce your muscles, you still need to leave a separate reserve circulating on its own. It has to hit the right spot at the exact split second you strike. The author is really focusing on the fundamentals here. Lucian leaps high into the air for a downward strike, but Aizen blocks it effortlessly with his wooden sword. With a single, simple sweep, Aizen sends Lucian flying backward across the arena. Lucian slides across the dirt, realizing the pure gap in technical mastery between a veteran like him and a literal god of the sword. He barely catches his balance, his wooden sword scraping against the ground as he braces himself. He is physically exhausted and breathing heavily, but his golden eyes are completely locked onto his target. Aizen stands there perfectly calm, his white beard looking majestic as he assesses his student. The old man raises his wooden sword, and suddenly a swirling green mana aura coats the weapon. He tells Lucian to take everything he has learned over the last few days and try to defend against this next strike. The goal is to analyze the opponent's speed and movements, and respond with the exact right amount of force. Aizen moves with blinding speed, bringing his wooden blade down like a hammer. Lucian realizes the core of Aizen's teaching is naturalness, making your movements flow smoothly like water. That is how you minimize physical power loss and still hit with maximum kinetic output. He refuses to be overwhelmed, looking directly at the incoming green strike. A brilliant blue mana erupts around Lucian's wooden blade as he prepares to meet the blow. The weapons crash together, creating a massive shockwave that blows dust across the stone floor. Lucian is gritting his teeth, straining under the physical weight of Aizen's green aura. Aizen is staring right back, looking deeply into the young master's eyes. The blue and green energies flare intensely, lighting up the entire indoor training hall. Aizen looks slightly surprised, realizing the sheer potential of the vessel he is currently training. The pressure slowly dissipates as the wooden blades part. Aizen decides to end the training session there, telling Lucian to remember that exact physical sensation. He promises that mastering this specific balance is what turns a regular fighter into an elite swordsman. Lucian can only manage a weak laugh, completely spent from the intensity of the lesson. He literally slides down the wall, his legs turning into complete jelly as he hits the floor. He gasps out a thank you, exhausted but incredibly satisfied with his progress. Meanwhile, the surrounding guards are busy cleaning up the absolute mess left behind by their sparring session. The workers are whispering to each other, absolutely terrified by the level of training the third young master is undergoing. They are genuinely wondering if the kid is even going to survive the week under the Sword Saint's guidance. Later, Lucian is sitting inside, trying to rest his aching muscles. He smiles, thinking about how he managed to survive another day of this madness. It is honestly hilarious how happy he is just to still be breathing after a basic practice session. He looks at his shaking hand, realizing the training is brutal for a very specific reason. It is designed to physically strip away the bad habits he built up during his past life as a mercenary. As Captain Jake, he had to fight dirty, using cheap tricks and sudden movements to survive on the battlefield. But this structured training is helping him rebuild his combat foundation from scratch, and he is adapting incredibly fast. He looks at his wooden sword, feeling a deep, genuine respect for the old man. Aizen knows exactly how to push him to his absolute limit, creating scaled crises to draw out the perfect reactions. You cannot do that unless you completely understand your student's physical condition down to the bone. It is a level of instruction Lucian has never experienced before, and he can feel himself growing stronger every single day. In his past life, he believed that complex, secret techniques were the only way to reach a higher realm. He never focused on basic concepts like balance, flow, and conservation of energy. He grips the wooden sword tightly, a sudden wave of realization hitting him. If he had known these fundamental teachings in his past life as Captain Jake, if he had possessed this level of physical foundation when he stood on those castle walls, how much closer could his sword have gotten to reaching that monster? Commander Crawford? He remembers Crawford's cold voice telling him to die for the Empire, and his own bitter smile. He remembers clashing swords with the genius commander in the middle of a literal war zone. The pure gap in natural talent that felt completely impossible to bridge back then. If he had this foundation, maybe they would have at least exchanged a few decent blows before the end. He snaps back to reality, feeling a bit unsatisfied with just ending the day like this. He wishes he had a proper opponent to test these new movements on without having to hold back. Right on cue, he hears heavy footsteps echoing down the stone hallway. He looks up and spots a very familiar, arrogant-looking kid walking into the training hall. Aizen looks up, his sharp green eyes narrowing as the visitor approaches. It is Joshua, the fourth young master, looking like a budget prince in a green coat with his servants in tow. He greets Aizen as his master, putting on an incredibly polite and respectful act. Aizen asks what brings him here, reminding him that he is currently in the middle of training Lucian. Joshua's butler is standing behind him, sweating profusely while carrying a heavy sword case. Joshua smiles, a look of pure, calculated mischief on his face. He says that since his older brother has finally started training, he wanted to help out. He looks directly at Lucian, asking if he wants to spar with his dear younger brother to test his progress. Lucian grips his wooden sword, immediately reading the situation. He smiles, realizing a perfect punching bag has just delivered itself right to his door. The group stands in the center of the training hall, the political tension rising immediately. Aizen asks Joshua what he actually means by helping his older brother train. Joshua suggests a sparring match to test how well Lucian controls his mana in a practical fight. He offers himself as the opponent, putting on a sweet, innocent smile. He claims they barely get to interact as brothers, so this is a rare opportunity to bond. He begs Aizen to allow it, playing the part of the polite disciple perfectly. Lucian stands with his back turned, looking down at his wooden weapon. He is internally laughing at how incredibly smooth this kid thinks he is. The kid talks a big game about brotherly love and helping him train. Yet, he brought a real metal sword to a guy who has been practicing for less than a week. It is so incredibly transparent that it is almost funny. The plan is obvious. Humiliate Lucian in front of the Sword Saint to secure his own position in the succession. If Aizen watches, the victory will carry massive political weight within the estate. Lucian notices Aizen looking at him, silently signaling him to just reject the challenge. But if Lucian backs down, it will put Aizen in a very awkward spot politically for refusing a disciple. Lucian takes a firm step forward onto the stone floor. He speaks up, telling Aizen that he gladly accepts his younger brother's generous proposal. He puts on his signature bright, fake noble smile to match Joshua's energy. He says he simply cannot overlook such commendable motivation from his younger sibling. He declares that he will personally educate this immature little brother of his. He leans in, telling Joshua that today is the very last day his childish behavior will be tolerated. Aizen looks at them, realizing Lucian knows exactly what Joshua is planning, but is choosing to face it head on. He sighs, saying that if both of them are this determined, he will allow the match. But he warns them that this will be the last spar of this kind, and he will stop it instantly if it gets dangerous. Both brothers salute, promising to keep his warning in mind. They lock eyes up close, both smiling like absolute psychopaths. They take their positions on the circular mark in the center of the hall. Aizen stands between them, reminding them that this is not a real fight to injure each other. He tells Lucian to focus purely on learning during this match, and he tells Joshua to act responsibly as the senior swordsman who held the blade first. He tells them both to fight with honor, representing the family name. They both grip the hilts of their real metal swords, pulling them from their sheaths. The steel rings out as they face each other, the atmosphere getting incredibly heavy. Joshua is internally fuming, looking at Lucian with sheer annoyance. He is mad that Lucian is suddenly acting like a big brother just because he was born a little earlier. He grips his hilt, planning to wipe that smug smile off Lucian's face permanently. He wants to teach him that birth order means absolutely nothing in this household. Lucian notes Joshua's incredibly vicious expression, finding it highly amusing. He thinks about how even his worst enemies in his past life did not look this pathetic. He feels the familiar, cool weight of real steel in his hands again. It has been about 2 months since he last held a real weapon. If this was his past life, he would have already thrown dirt in his face and used every dirty trick to win. But today, he has to pretend to be a proper, noble son. He glances at Aizen, knowing that using mercenary techniques will instantly expose his identity. He looks at Joshua, thinking that despite the kid's arrogance, he is still just an inexperienced brat. Joshua mocks him, asking why he is suddenly looking around so cautiously. He asks if holding a real sword is finally making him feel the fear. He smugly notes that big accidents often happen during real spars, when the skill levels are too far apart. Lucian's face shifts into a very dark grin, his patience completely running out. A massive, dark blue aura begins to flare around Lucian's body. He declares that, for an annoying little brother like him, a good beating is the only cure. Joshua's smug face completely vanishes, replaced by sudden shock as he lunges forward. Joshua kicks off the stone floor, rushing in with a fast strike. He screams that he will make Lucian regret those words. Lucian braces his stance, analyzing the attack with cold precision. He notes that Joshua's movements are decent, since he also trained under the Sword Saint. His basics are solid, and Lucian is already low on mana from his previous practice session. But Joshua's complete lack of real combat experience is his biggest downfall. He fell for a simple provocation instantly, completely throwing off his own pacing. Lucian applies Aizen's concept of concentration, focusing his remaining mana into his feet. He moves with blinding speed, taking advantage of the split-second opening in Joshua's guard. Aizen's eyes widen in absolute surprise as he watches the kid move. The butler and the guards are frozen in shock, their mouths hanging wide open. Joshua realizes he messed up, staring at the incoming blade in pure terror. Lucian grins wildly, telling him to grit his teeth and try to block it. The steel smashes together with a massive shockwave, freezing the frame on their colossal clash. The wind whistles through the massive arena as the two steel blades grind against each other. Our guy Lucian is putting the physical press on his little brother, smiling like a sleep paralysis demon. He leans in close and delivers some grade A psychological damage, telling him that a real man shouldn't be dropping to his knees so quickly. Joshua grits his teeth so hard you can practically hear them cracking from here. He swings wildly to break the lock, screaming at Lucian to shut his mouth. Boots skid across the cracked floor as Joshua retreats to create some space. He is gasping for air, desperately trying to convince himself that Lucian's block was just a total fluke. He charges right back in, completely losing his mind. He throws a massive horizontal slash, but the air splits as Lucian casually leans back to avoid it. Boots press firmly into the stone as Lucian tracks his movements with zero panic. Steel bites steel once again, but Lucian deflects the force effortlessly. Joshua is looking like a wild animal, while our guy just stares at him with complete deadpan indifference. The blades clash in a rapid blur of sparks. Joshua is throwing everything he has got into these swings, his eyes wide with panic. Sparks fly across the courtyard as they trade high-speed blows. Over on the sidelines, the audience is looking highly stressed. The portly butler is sweating through his collar, asking the Sword Saint if they should stop the match before someone gets hurt. He explains that Joshua is incredibly petty and has been harboring a massive grudge against Lucian for years. Because they are close in age, the constant comparison has turned Joshua into a ticking time bomb. The butler is terrified of a disaster, but Aizen tells him to relax. He says the fourth young master is hot-headed, but he is not stupid enough to ruin his own standing. Then, Aizen drops a line that makes the butler freeze, telling him he should actually be worrying about the opposite outcome. The butler looks completely lost. Aizen watches the steel clash, analyzing the massive gap in their actual combat reality. Lucian was born with a body of ridiculous natural potential, but he theoretically lacks the years of training to use it. Joshua has average talent, but he has been grinding his basics for years under proper instruction. On paper, a beginner should not be able to bridge that gap with just pure luck. But because Joshua is completely losing his temper, he is throwing away every single advantage he had. And our guy is just quietly waiting in the shadows for the perfect opening. Aizen notes that staying this calm in front of a live blade requires a very specific kind of mental state. You do not get that kind of composure from sitting in a classroom. Either the kid is completely oblivious, or he has the cold boldness of someone who has stared death right in the face. Aizen is definitely betting on the second option, and honestly, he is spot on. The impact shakes the floor as they clash again. Steel continues to ring out across the courtyard. Joshua keeps shouting, asking where all that smug confidence went. He tells Lucian he can still beg for mercy, but Lucian is busy observing just how much his brother is enjoying this. But behind that calm face, Lucian's physical body is actually taking a beating from the heavy impacts. His original plan was to end this with a single, devastating counterstrike after provoking him. The small miscalculation was that Joshua is actually more skilled than he anticipated, and Lucian's mana tank is dangerously low. He spent too much energy parrying the Sword Saint earlier, and now he cannot even fully reinforce his muscles. His physical limits are catching up to him fast, so he decides to stake everything on a single, final trade. Joshua notices Lucian's blade suddenly getting heavier for a split second, but he quickly realizes Lucian is visibly sweating and completely out of breath. He smirks, assuming his brother is just squeezing out the very last drop of his strength. He raises his sword high, laughing like he has already won the lottery. The blade comes down with full force, aimed straight at Lucian's head. But our guy's golden eye just tracks the trajectory with absolute, chilling focus. The sword smashes the floor, shattering the stone, but Lucian is already gone. Joshua's eyes go completely wide with terror, because right as the dust clears, he realizes his brother was smiling the entire time. He stands frozen, the cold sweat starting to pour. Lucian points out that Joshua put zero thought into a follow-up attack, completely falling for the exhausted bait. He smiles, letting him know that this exact lack of foresight is why he is the younger brother. Joshua screams in frustration and tries to pull his sword back, but his hand is moving too slow. Lucian's boot comes down hard. He stomps directly on the hilt of Joshua's sword, pinning it to the ground. He puts his full weight onto the kid's hand, completely locking him in place. He towers over him, asking him what he thinks is going to happen next. Joshua's pride instantly evaporates, his voice trembling as he tries to play the sibling card. Lucian raises his steel sword high into the sky, the sun reflecting off the sharp edge. He laughs, noting how Joshua only remembers they are brothers when a blade is hovering over his neck. He swings the sword down with terrifying velocity, the wind roaring as the frame cuts to black. Hashtag Chapter 22 Tootie City. Naturally, news of the third young master absolutely destroying his little brother spreads through the mansion at lightning speed. The servants are gossiping in the hallways, completely unable to believe the rumors. The butler attendants are arguing, pointing out that Lucian only picked up a sword a few days ago. The maids in the kitchen are giggling, whispering that the arrogant fourth young master left the arena in tears. The rumor mill is working overtime, but the reason it is spreading this fast and getting inflated with such perfect timing is because our purple-haired legend Hugo is standing right there, keeping the narrative perfectly controlled. Hans runs up, excitedly asking if the Sword Saint himself actually acknowledged the young master's talent. He is basically vibrating with excitement, boasting about how Lucian even took Joshua's sword as a trophy. And sure enough, back in Lucian's private study, that exact sword is currently sitting on his display rack. Our guy is casually humming a tune, looking incredibly pleased with himself. He stands by the window, admiring the beautiful day and the beautiful rumors he just manufactured. Everything went exactly according to his plan. He remembers the final moment of the spar, looking down at his terrified little brother. Joshua was on his knees, trembling and begging for his life. The blade was coming down in a silver flash. But Lucian did not go for a lethal strike. The impact shakes the entire courtyard as the steel bites into steel. Joshua is screaming his lungs out, completely apologizing for everything. But Lucian's strike was aimed slightly to the side. Broken steel clatters onto the stone floor as Joshua's sword is cleanly snapped in half. Lucian leans in close, his voice dropping to a whisper, warning him that next time will not be nearly as fun. He tells him to learn the difference between where he belongs and where he shouldn't stick his nose. He gives him a terrifying, shadow-faced glare that forces Joshua to nod frantically. Back in the present, Lucian smiles, knowing that display should keep the other siblings quiet for a good while. Now that the internal threats are temporarily handled, it is time to focus on his next target. He looks down at the intelligence report on his desk, his eyes narrowing as he prepares to deal with House Logan. Later that day, a massive hand slams onto a document in the Grand Conservatory. Grand Duke Sigmund sits in his ornate chair, holding the secret letter Lucian received from Hugo. Lucian stands before him, keeping his posture perfectly respectful, but completely unyielding. He explains that House Logan plans to make contact with their smuggling operations in Bestra in exactly 1 week. Sigmund taps his fingers on the table, processing the information. Lucian points out that while Bestra is currently a lawless territory, it is located right next to their main borders. The enemy clearly assumed the Grand Duke's eyes would not reach that far into the blind spot. Sigmund sips his tea, asking why Lucian is bringing this information directly to him. He reminds his son that he had already entrusted this entire investigation to him to handle independently. Lucian looks him dead in the eye and simply states that he needs strength. He explains that just because the beast is caught in a trap, it does not mean he currently has the actual tools to hunt it down. Sigmund lowers his teacup, his expression turning cold. He says that despite Lucian's bold words about earning merit, all he hears is a boy trying to hide behind his father's back. He asks if Lucian really believes the family will recognize this as his own achievement if he relies on external help. He states that a real hunter only earns his name when he takes down his prey using his own strength. If he cannot finish the job himself, it is nothing but a half-baked result. He points out that he gave Lucian both the opportunity and the authority to resolve this. Yet instead of facing the challenge, Lucian chose the safe, comfortable path. Sigmund demands to know if this is truly the absolute limit of his capabilities. Lucian's golden eyes narrow, his resolve completely hardening. The psychological pressure in the room gets incredibly heavy. Lucian states that if utilizing every available resource is what it takes to guarantee a successful hunt, he will choose that path every time. He argues that when the people are trembling under the shadow of a threat, insisting on personal glory is nothing but reckless, foolish pride. Even if a reckless plan succeeds, it only proves the leader cannot tell right from wrong, ultimately destroying the people's trust. He declares that the true essence of a hunt is not about the personal thrill of the catch, but about the safety of the things you are trying to protect. If they can completely eliminate the danger, he does not care if some narrow-minded nobles call it a half-baked achievement. He reaches down and crushes a rose, warning that if a leader cannot even draw the bow when it matters, they will lose everything. The wind rustles the flowers as his words echo through the glass greenhouse. Sigmund remains completely silent for a long moment. Then, A slow, genuine smile spreads across the giant's face. He admits he cannot even remember the last time someone had the absolute balls to argue with him like this to his face. He praises the answer, stating that a true leader must have unyielding conviction in the path they choose to walk. Lucian realizes the entire speech was just a massive psychological test. Sigmund confirms it, explaining he wanted to see if Lucian would easily sway under authority or stand his ground. He points out that no one would ever follow a leader who cannot even hold on to their own beliefs. Lucian internally sighs, realizing there really are no easy days in this family. He closes his eyes for a brief second to catch his mental breath. Then he asks if this means he actually gets the military support he requested. Sigmund agrees, stating he will give him the exact tools required for the job. He agrees that moving a massive army will draw too much attention, so they must use a highly specialized elite force. Lucian smiles, asking if a standard squad of knights will be enough. Sigmund looks at him with absolute, chilling intensity and tells him he is granting him the Black Lion. A massive, dark, clawed hand sweeps across the screen as we get our first look at the terrifying weight of the force Lucian is about to lead. 1 week later, we find ourselves in Bestra, a ruined, crumbling border town. It is a wretched place, looking completely abandoned. Hugo explains that Bestra used to be a bustling transit city, but it was long ago bypassed by other trade routes, leaving it to rot, which is exactly why the bad guys chose this absolute ghost town to set up their secret, illegal drug facility. As they walk through the quiet streets, Hugo looks back at our boy under his hood. He asks Lucian how on earth he knew their plans in such specific detail when even Senior Hans was left completely in the dark. Lucian just smirks under his cloak, telling him he will explain everything when the time is right. He asks if the trap has been set according to his instructions. Hugo confirms everything, stating the warehouse is packed with dummy crates that perfectly match the fake reports they leaked. He says the bait is ready, and all that is left is to wait for the backup to arrive. But he looks incredibly hesitant. Hugo asks if Lucian is disappointed that they had to rely on the Grand Duke's military support to pull this off. He quickly panics, clarifying that he knows there is no room for failure in a mission of this scale. He is just deeply frustrated by his own lack of personal power. He wishes he was strong enough to deliver this entire victory to Lucian without having to borrow his father's troops. Our guy looks at him, walks over, and places a comforting hand on his shoulder. He tells Hugo he understands exactly how he feels, but they are just getting started. He uses a poetic rowing analogy, reminding him that impatience will only lead them astray. They have a long journey ahead of them. Besides, Lucian laughs, pointing out that Hugo is barely past 30, so he has plenty of time to grow stronger. Hugo's face goes completely flat as he deadpans that he is actually only 23 years old. Lucian's jaw literally hits the floor in absolute disbelief. The silence in the alleyway is so loud, you can practically hear the crickets chirping. Our guy sweat drops, muttering that Hugo looking this rugged at 23 is just deeply depressing to think about. Crows scatter into the dark, overcast sky. Lucian looks around, realizing the scheduled meeting time is drawing near, but the surrounding streets are still dead quiet. Suddenly, a massive chill runs down their spines. Hugo reacts instantly, whipping his sword from his sheath in a desperate arc. But a dark, leather-gloved hand appears out of nowhere, stopping his blade mid-swing with a bare hand. The mysterious figure looms in the shadows, calling Hugo's reaction laughably slow. Hugo is sweating bullets, completely unable to budge his weapon against this man's sheer physical strength. He realizes he has never been overpowered like this in his entire life, completely paralyzed by a single guard. Lucian speaks up calmly from behind, telling Hugo to stand down. He lets him know this man is not the enemy. It is the legendary Supreme Shadow Force of House Valdek, the Black Lion. The commander of the unit steps fully into the light, his scarred face looking incredibly dangerous. Hugo's eyes go wide as he realizes the rumors about these monsters are actually real. They are the ultimate covert unit, completely invisible and answerable only to the Grand Duke himself. The other elite Shadow Knights materialize from the surrounding rooftops like ghosts. The three of them stand before our guy, their presence completely suffocating. The scarred commander salutes, paying his respects to the third young master. He explains the sudden ambush was just a small test to assess the reaction of Lucian's personal guard. Lucian stares at them, his internal mercenary instincts screaming. Even in his past life, the Black Lions were treated like mythical figures in ghost stories. Now he understands why, because even with his high-level sensory training, he could not detect a single trace of them until they chose to appear. They are suppressing their mana so perfectly that they look like regular statues. A dark smirk slowly spreads across our guy's face. He is highly impressed by the level of backup his father decided to send. They immediately move inside the dark, 3-story warehouse to set the trap. Lucian sits at the center, briefing the squad that the Logan family has fully taken the bait and is heading straight to this location. He gives them a single, clear directive. He wants the person in charge of this operation captured alive, but everyone else can be eliminated without mercy. He leaves the rest of the tactical details entirely to the commander's discretion. The commander looks at him, realizing the Grand Duke did not send them just to hand this kid a free achievement. This third young master possesses the cold, calm composure of a seasoned battlefield commander. His tactical judgment is flawless, and he is already utilizing his resources like a veteran. The commander realizes a massive shift in the house's hierarchy is currently underway. The elite squad salutes in unison, accepting his command. Outside, the sunset paints the sky in a deep, bloody orange. An expensive, gold-trimmed noble carriage rolls slowly through the ruined streets. The carriage door begins to open as it comes to a halt. Inside, a young noble with purple hair is holding a white silk cloth to his nose, complaining about the dull journey. He mutters that if his father had not ordered him, he would never have set foot in this filthy commoner town. His boots step down onto the carriage platform. He wants to wrap this deal up as quickly as possible and return to the main estate. The fourth son of House Logan, Philip Logan, looks around the ruined street with absolute disgust. He has no idea he is walking straight into his own funeral. The warehouse doors creak open as Philip's guard enters the dark building. Our disguised guy immediately runs up, bowing and scraping like a completely terrified servant. The guard draws his sword, pointing it straight at Lucian's throat, demanding he identify himself. Lucian fakes a stuttering, high-pitched voice, groveling and claiming he is just here to guide them on Boss Hugo's orders. He plays the part of a pathetic, weak commoner flawlessly, keeping his head low. Philip tells his guard to lower his sword, saying it is beneath their status to even speak with such filth. But under his hood, Lucian's golden eyes narrow with an extremely dark grin, realizing they just bagged a massive, high-value target. He analyzes Philip's arrogant posture, noting the absolute lack of tension despite entering hostile territory. The kid is clearly a pampered, brainless noble who has never seen a real battlefield. He counts the escort, noting they brought about a dozen apprentice knights. The head guard looks like a decent fighter, but nothing the Black Lions cannot handle in a split second. Then, Lucian notices something highly unusual in the back of the entourage. Philip snaps at him to stop standing around like an idiot and lead the way. Lucian runs ahead faking fear, but his eyes are locked onto the maids walking in the rear. His heart skips a beat as he stares at the messy purple hair of the middle maid. He is internally screaming, trying to convince himself that there is no way she is actually in this town. They enter the warehouse, the heavy door slamming shut behind them. Philip immediately holds his silk cloth to his nose, complaining about the wretched stench and wondering if Hugo embezzled their funds. Hugo steps out from the shadows, welcoming them to the facility. He keeps his tone perfectly polite, claiming the delay was due to handling the extremely delicate nature of the product. Philip sneers, asking if a commoner like Hugo really thought he could pocket their money. Hugo laughs it off, asking why the young master decided to grace them with his presence. He claims the product they prepared is strong enough to shake the entire region to its core. He smiles warmly, offering to show him the item immediately. Lucian internally praises Hugo's incredible acting skills, completely keeping his composure under pressure. Philip warns him that if the results are disappointing, Hugo's family will suffer the consequences. He rudely barks at the disguised Lucian to go fetch the item from his master. Lucian fakes a submissive bow and jogs over to Hugo. Hugo reaches into his tunic and hands our guy a long, glowing, blue magical container. Their eyes lock for a split second, signaling that the trap is officially active. Lucian grips the blue magical stone tightly in his hand, and in a sudden gear shift, he spins around and hurls the container straight into the air toward Philip. He screams that he is delivering the product right to their faces. Philip's eyes go wide with shock, screaming at him in absolute panic. The head guard reacts on pure instinct, drawing his sword to swat the incoming container away. Steel meets the magical glass, shattering it mid-air. The guard realizes his mistake a second too late, screaming for the young master to get behind him. An absolute, blinding flash of white-blue light explodes, filling the entire room. Lucian and Hugo immediately shield their eyes, having anticipated the flash. The Logan guards are completely blinded, screaming in agony as their vision is destroyed. The brilliant blue light leaks through the cracks of the warehouse walls. Philip lies on his back on the floor, clutching his face and screaming that he cannot see a thing. He frantically yells for his guards to defend him, but the warehouse has gone completely quiet. One of the guards groans weakly, his voice fading. Philip keeps shouting, demanding they hurry up and protect his life. But the only thing approaching him is a massive, dark silhouette in the white smoke. The head guard tries to warn him to run, his voice choking up. Blood pours from the guard's mouth as he gasps out that they have been completely betrayed. A heavy body falls to the wooden floor with a dull thud. Philip is hyperventilating, realizing his entire elite guard has been wiped out in seconds. The camera pans out to show the silent, clinical slaughter performed by the Black Lions. The elite Shadow Knights move through the mist, effortlessly ending the remaining survivors. The maids scream in absolute terror as the blood splatters against the walls. Lucian explains that they used a flash magic stone, an extremely rare and expensive tool that blinds anyone in range. It is the ultimate weapon for seizing an enemy's vision in a split second. Even so, the Black Lion's speed is terrifying, having wiped out a dozen trained knights in the blink of an eye. The scarred commander steps forward, announcing all immediate threats have been neutralized. He says he will handle the transport of the prisoners to Kelheim. Lucian stands in the smoke, remembering his father's warning about the true weight of leadership. Philip is backing away on his knees, crying and begging them not to come any closer. He desperately screams that he is a high noble, the fourth son of the great house Logran. A Black Lion Knight stands over him, letting him know his fate will be decided by the Grand Duke. Philip is completely paralyzed, realizing he just walked into a trap set by House Valdek. He looks up at the disguised commoner, realizing the horrifying truth of who is actually standing before him. He tries to scream for the guards outside, hoping someone will save him. Lucian sighs, thinking the entire mission is clean and over. But suddenly, one of the screaming maids throws a steel sword across the floor toward the quiet, purple-haired maid. The maid yells at her to pick up the weapon, commanding her to fight. The purple-haired maid walks slowly toward the sword, her posture completely changing. Her hand grips the hilt of the steel blade on the floor, and in that exact millisecond, a massive dark purple combat aura erupts around her like a storm. Lucian stares in absolute shock, realizing the future sword demon Felix has just picked up her first sword. Philip is literally crawling through a pool of his own guard's blood, looking absolutely pathetic. He grabs his maid's dress, screaming for Felicia to get him out of this nightmare. He is hyperventilating, promising to grant her whatever she wants if she just saves his skin. He even offers to ensure her mother is never insulted for her lowly blood again. He yells at her to say something, asking if protecting his life is not the sole reason she exists. But Felicia just looks back at him with absolute, freezing disgust. Her fingers wrap around the hilt of the steel sword, the metal ringing out in the dark room. She tells him to shut his mouth, stating she is sick and tired of his endless stupidity. Nixon looks on with pure, unadulterated snobbery, mocking the noble for hiding behind a maid. He turns his attention to Felicia, admitting he respects her willingness to fight. But he warns her not to throw her life away on a display of foolish, reckless pride. He claims he is offering her a mercy simply because she is a woman. Felicia's eyes flare with a dark, glowing violet light as she raises her blade. Boots shift on the dusty wooden floor. Nixon sighs, noting her choice, and prepares to strike. He launches himself forward, bringing his massive broadsword down with incredible force. But Felicia's purple eyes track his movements with unnatural speed. She takes a sharp breath, her body turning into a blur. The swords collide with a massive, deafening, metallic screech. She maneuvers her body at an impossible, physics-defying angle, mid-air. Sparks fly through the dark warehouse. She spins, her sword slicing through the air like a whip. Nixon's eyes widen in absolute shock as the tip of her blade grazes his throat. He realizes just how close he came to losing his head. A thin line of blood splatters across the wooden floor. Felicia lands gracefully back on her feet, her sword held perfectly steady. Watching from the sidelines, Lucian is completely flabbergasted by her reaction speed. He recognizes those completely unrestricted, unconventional sword movements instantly. It is the exact same fluid grace he witnessed on the battlefield in his past life. The same delicate features, the same slender frame. It is the sword demon Felix. He remembers encountering Felix resting under a tree during the war years ago. And in this moment, the pieces of the puzzle finally click together. Nixon wipes the blood from his neck, realizing he was a millisecond away from death. He looks down at his hand, his eyes turning cold. He admits he made a massive mistake underestimating her hidden strength. He declares he will swallow his pride and treat her as a true threat. A massive, dark blue aura erupts around Nixon, shaking the entire building. Felicia grits her teeth, realizing she is facing an opponent several levels above her current physical limit. She glances up, her survival instincts highly active. She spots the other elite Shadow Knights watching her from the wooden rafters. She realizes there is absolutely zero chance of her escaping this place alive. So she decides to pour everything she has got into one final, desperate trade. She resolves to leave this world with absolutely zero regrets. Upstairs, the Knights note her incredible mental fortitude. They are amazed that a young girl can face Nixon's full killing intent without her hands shaking. Blood drops steadily from the ceiling as the tension reaches a breaking point. Both fighters lunge forward at the exact same time. Their movements create a vacuum in the dusty air. The blue and purple energies clash in the center of the warehouse. The steel rings out as they prepare to trade lethal blows. Their eyes are locked, both prepared to end it. But right as the blades are about to connect, our guy's voice echoes through the room, commanding both of them to stop immediately. The energy clashing between them is forcefully broken. Lucian steps directly between the two fighters, his cloak billowing around him. He calmly announces that he will not tolerate any more useless bloodshed on this mission. He orders them to lower their weapons. Nixon is furious, pointing out that Lucian gave them full discretion, and leaving a monster like her alive is a massive threat to the family. But Lucian turns back with an extremely cold glare, asking the knight if he has forgotten who granted him that authority in the first place. He says he is fully aware of the danger, but continuing this fight will only end with a corpse on the floor. He looks directly at Felicia, calling her by her real name, and offers her a proposal. He suggests they settle this entire matter with a formal duel between the two of them. If he loses, she is free to walk out of this warehouse safely. But if she loses, she must lay down her sword and surrender peacefully. Hashtag chapter 26. The entire warehouse goes dead quiet as the proposal hangs in the air. Our guy just stands there, looking incredibly smug and confident. Felicia is completely flabbergasted, wondering what this crazy young master is actually planning. Philip, still clutching his face on the floor, screams at her to accept the deal immediately. He yells that his personal safety is the only thing that matters right now. He keeps barking, calling his dead guards incompetent fools, and complaining about the hardship he is enduring. He demands she prove she is actually useful, unlike her lowly mother. But Lucian's voice cuts through the room like a razor blade, telling the noble to shut his mouth. He says the men who died trying to protect him are not trash Philip can speak of so lightly, and warns him not to insult Felicia again. He narrows his eyes, promising to physically cut out his tongue if he hears another word. He turns back to the Black Lions, declaring that the consequences of this duel are entirely his responsibility. He expects them to honor his promise even if he happens to lose. Felicia looks at him, her eyes softening slightly as she formally accepts the challenge. Lucian draws his sword, a massive golden aura erupting around his frame. The two fighters take their distance, the tension rising once again. Upstairs, Nixon asks the commander if they are really just going to stand by and watch this madness. He points out that even though he was holding back, the girl managed to injure him. Her sword form is completely unrefined and lacks formal training, but her pure talent and sharp eyes make her incredibly dangerous. He warns that with the young master's current level, he will be slaughtered. But the commander just looks down at Lucian with an incredibly intrigued expression. He agrees that martial prowess is an entirely different matter than strategic boldness. But he tells Nixon they are going to observe the situation for just this once. The knight looks completely confused. The commander explains that the moment Lucian borrowed his sword for the duel, the boy whispered the exact analysis Nixon just made about the girl's talent, which means our guy clearly understands the exact danger he is stepping into. He wants to see what kind of tactical picture the young master is painting here. Meanwhile, Felicia is analyzing Lucian as she prepares her stance. She realizes he is completely different from any arrogant noble she has ever met. He went through the trouble of disguising himself to inspect their forces, and now he is taking an unnecessary risk. She cannot fathom his true intentions. But one thing is certain. Physically, he is absolutely no match for her. Even so, she is grateful for the respect he showed her, and resolves to leave peacefully if she wins. Lucian smirks, telling her she will be coming with him to Kelheim if she loses. Both of them brace their stances, their eyes locked on each other. They raise their blades in unison. Felicia decides to neutralize him in a single, non-lethal strike to avoid hurting him. Her purple eyes flash with intense focus. She lunges forward, her body turning into a purple streak of light. She brings her sword down with incredible speed, but the air splits as Lucian's blade rises to meet her. Steel meets steel with a loud, clanging impact. Felicia's eyes go completely wide with shock as her strike is perfectly blocked. They trade high-speed blows, the sparks flying through the air. She flips back, landing a flurry of strikes from every angle. She is sweating, completely unable to understand how his slow body is tracking her speed. His breathing and reaction times are clearly inferior to hers, yet every single one of her strikes is being blocked with absolute, psychic precision. The blades ring out across the warehouse. Under his hood, Lucian's internal golden commentary starts flowing. He knows she is completely baffled by how she is being pushed back. She is exhausted from her previous clash, but the real reason she is losing is far more personal. Our guy knows her combat habits better than she knows them herself. He knows every single weakness, every tell, and the exact flow of her sword's path. Because in his past life as Captain Jake, the two of them clashed swords on the battlefield for years, making each other's style their own. Lucian's physical body might be weak, but his muscle memory remembers her, and her alone, as the frame cuts to black on their clashing blades. Midnight at the Valdec mansion, and the entire estate looks peaceful under a massive full moon. But inside, the gears of high society politics are grinding at maximum speed. Grand Duke Sigmund is standing on his balcony, waiting for a very specific report. The giant of the empire does not even turn around when his shadow captain arrives. He immediately asks how his third son handled the battlefield. Captain Alistair stands in the dark, looking incredibly serious. He says the boy has an unwavering core. Sigmund looks out over the territory. He was expecting his kid to get swept up in the chaos of a real operation. But instead, he gets this glowing review. Alistair realizes he might be crossing a line by praising a candidate in the succession war, so he quickly backs off and apologizes. But Sigmund just chuckles. If the captain of the Black Lions is this impressed, then Lucian must have pulled off something genuinely insane. He holds up the letter Lucian sent him, his eyes scanning the demands written on it. Our guy did not just report a success. He basically sent his dad a bill with a list of demands. Sigmund puts a hand on Alistair's shoulder. He decides that since the boy delivered such a massive win, he can play along with his little game. To celebrate, Sigmund offers his captain a drink. A top-tier bottle of liquor just arrived at the estate. He smiles, knowing it is Alistair's personal favorite. It is good to be the boss. Alistair accepts with a grin, warning his lord that the story of what Lucian did in that warehouse is going to take all night to explain. The two veterans stand under the stars, completely unaware that the kid they are talking about is already planning his next 5 moves. Morning comes, and the birds are chirping like they do not live in a brutal dark fantasy universe. The caravan is heading back to the heart of the territory, Kelheim. The mission in Bestra is officially wrapped up. Lucian rides at the front, looking incredibly peaceful. He looks like a model in a shampoo commercial, but his brain is running pure mercenary math. He starts looking back at the aftermath of the raid. The duel with the future sword demon was a complete success. Felicia exhausted her entire mana pool trying to hit him and collapsed right into his arms. He immediately sent her and the other maids to a secure nearby city to recover. He needs his future secret weapon in perfect condition. And then we have this clown. Philip Logren is currently sweating through his expensive silk cloak, muttering about how his father is going to absolutely ruin him. He is kneeling on the cold dirt, looking like a wet dog that just realized the vacuum cleaner is turned on. To teach this arrogant noble a lesson, Lucian made him dig graves for his fallen guards with his own hands. Our guy stood there coldly, watching the pampered prince cry over a shovel. He was hoping the physical labor would make Philip realize the actual weight of the lives he threw away for a shady drug deal. But of course, that was a massive cope. Philip is currently tied up behind a horse, screaming his lungs out at Hugo. He is demanding first-class prisoner treatment because he is a high-ranking noble. This guy is literally hostage posting in real life. He screams at Lucian, asking if he is crazy enough to make an enemy out of the entire Logren family. Lucian just sighs. It is honestly impressive how some people can look death in the face and still worry about their aristocratic privilege. He stops his horse, looks down at the tied-up noble, and decides to give him some free life advice. With a very calm, terrifying smile, Lucian tells him that if he wants to keep breathing, he should watch his mouth. He leans in and reminds Philip that they are currently entering a place where even his powerful Marquis father would not dare to make a sound. The trees clear, and we see the massive, sprawling fortress city of Kelheim. Welcome to the Lion's Den. The giant iron gates slowly creak open, letting the sunlight flood the stone pathway. Our guy rides in, looking like the main character he is. And suddenly, the entire street erupts into absolute chaos. The citizens are screaming his name like he is a pop star. They are throwing flower petals and cheering for the third young master who just single-handedly smashed the Logran family's illegal drug ring. The crowd is going wild. They are calling him the true Lion of Valdec. Hugo is sweating bullets on his horse, leaning over to ask what the hell is going on. Lucian casually admits he did send a little letter asking for a warm welcome. He smiles. He was expecting a small crowd, but it turns out his dad decided to give him the absolute maximum level of public relations support. He tells Hugo to stop looking like a suspicious criminal, hold his head high, and just enjoy the free clout. Hugo looks forward, his eyes widening. This is a guy who spent his entire life in the dark alleys of Bestra, and now thousands of people are cheering for him. They ride through the rain of confetti side by side. Our guy is playing the crowd like a fiddle. Meanwhile, way up in a stone watchtower, two figures are observing the entire parade. Sigmund and Edwin are watching the spectacle. Sigmund grunts, complaining that he must be getting soft in his old age to grant a triumphal procession just because his kid asked nicely. Edwin smiles his perfect, unreadable butler smile. He notes that the kid did deliver a flawless victory, so the parade is actually very well deserved. He explains that Lucian's letter was not just a massive ego trip to show off his new victory. It was a calculated strategic move to show the entire territory that the Valdec family is united, while sending a massive threat to House Logran. Sigmund looks out with a serious expression. He knows the political landscape of the empire is starting to rot from the inside. The crown is cracking, the traditional noble alliances are crumbling, and the entire empire is slowly sliding toward a massive civil war. To survive the coming storm, they cannot afford to look weak. They have to sharpen their claws and show absolute dominance. A few hours later, we are inside Lucian's personal room, which looks like a 5-star hotel suite. Our guy immediately faceplants onto the mattress, groaning in absolute relief. He was starting to miss the comfortable, noble lifestyle. His father scheduled their official private report for later in the evening, which means he has a couple of hours to just exist. He stares at the ceiling, his mercenary brain running through the ledger of the Bestra mission. First, he secured Felicia much faster than he planned. In the future timeline, she was a mythic tier threat, and now she is under his roof. Second, he completely cleaned up his reputation in Kelheim and gave Hugo a massive taste of what it feels like to be a hero instead of a thug. And third, he established a direct working relationship with the elite Black Lions, proving he can command top-tier forces. The scattered pieces of his grand strategy are finally starting to connect. The throne that felt miles away is looking slightly closer. He smirks, staring at the ceiling. He is playing chess, while the other young masters are still trying to figure out how the horse moves. He remembers his old mercenary squad from his past life, sitting around a campfire in the mud. One of his old buddies is laughing, saying people would be terrified if they saw them now. He sits up on the bed, shaking off the nostalgia. There is no time to get sentimental. His eyes go cold and sharp. It is time to get back to work. The board is set. He is ready to head into Sigmund's study and squeeze every single drop of reward out of his giant dad. The scene shifts to the grand dining room, lit by an opulent chandelier that probably costs more than a commoner's house. Sigmund and Lucian are having a quiet father-son dinner. Sigmund notes that capturing a Logran heir alive was a massive stroke of luck. He holds up a fork with a perfect slice of steak, explaining that they now have concrete, undeniable evidence of House Logran's illegal activities. He looks at his son and officially praises him. Our guy puts on his best innocent smile and says he is honored. Lucian giggles like a sweet, dutiful child, saying he only succeeded because his father was generous enough to lend him the Black Lions. He takes a bite of his food and casually asks what is going to happen to their prisoner, Philip Logran. Sigmund takes a sip of his wine. He says Marquis Logran is a snake, and he definitely won't just sit back and watch his son get executed. He narrows his eyes, his voice dropping into a cold, clinical register. He explains that Bernhardt Logran is the type of man who treats his own children like pieces on a ledger. He looks at Lucian with a piercing glare. Sigmund notes that for a man like Logran, losing one useless child does not matter as long as he has another heir to carry on the family name. The wine in the glass ripples, matching the sudden drop in the room's temperature. Sigmund tells him not to worry about the political fallout. Instead, he asks Lucian what he wants as a reward for his success. Our guy's smile falters for a split second. He knows his father saw right through the letter he sent. He scratches the back of his neck, pretending to look embarrassed. He says since his dad is being so direct, he will make a humble request. He starts with Hugo. He wants his loyal right-hand man to receive a proper reward for his massive contribution. But before the word knight can even leave his mouth, Sigmund drops a flat, absolute impossible. Our guy's fake polite face completely glitches. He asks why, pointing out that Hugo was the key to the entire operation. Sigmund cuts his steak coldly. He says Hugo's past ties to the Marquis cannot be ignored. If Lucian had not cornered him first, Hugo would have helped the Lograns destroy the territory. Lucian argues back, saying that is a hypothetical scenario. The reality is that Hugo chose the Valdex and delivered a massive win. The reflection of Sigmund's eye glints off the silver knife. He calls his son's name. Sigmund stands up, towering over the table. He says a true knight must possess honor and achievements that absolutely no one in the Empire can question. He asks if Lucian honestly believes a street thug from Bestra has those qualifications. Lucian looks down, realizing his dad is not budging on this. Sigmund says he can give Hugo chests of gold, or even write him a brand new noble identity if he wants to live comfortably. But knighthood is out of the question. The timing is completely wrong. Lucian backs down, putting on his submissive son act. He apologizes, saying he got a bit too emotional and hasty. Sigmund sits back down, telling him to ask for something else. Something slightly less ridiculous this time. And that is when the trap springs. Lucian's mouth curls into a highly mischievous, dark smirk. His eyes gleam with complete malice. He asks for a very minor favor. Let Felicia meet the Sword Saint, Sir Eisen. Sigmund's jaw drops. A bead of sweat actually rolls down his face. This is a masterclass in negotiation. Ask for something impossible, get rejected, and then slide in your real, even more insane request. The scene cuts to the sunny courtyard of the estate's high-security noble prison. Two guards are standing outside the heavy wooden doors. Inside a surprisingly clean stone cell, Felicia is sitting quietly on a bed, looking lost in thought. She looks around, realizing this place is far too luxurious for a regular prisoner. They even assigned her a personal maid. She looks at the fresh bread and soup they brought her. They are treating her like an honored guest instead of a criminal. She hugs her knees, wondering what the Valdecs are actually planning. She sighs, thinking that maybe this quiet prison life is better than the hell she left behind. She stares blankly, her purple eyes filled with a deep, quiet sadness. She remembers the night she fled the Logan estate, running through the dark with raw, chaotic mana tearing her body apart. She whispers to herself that she just wants to hold a real sword one last time before her body completely breaks down. She thinks about her own greed, remembering the moment her hidden blade clattered onto the stone floor during the raid. She remembers hiding her sword behind her back, trying to pretend she was just a harmless maid. She remembers the terror of drawing her weapon against the Black Lions. And then she remembers Lucen, pointing his blade at her with absolute cold confidence. She remembers the feeling of collapsing, her strength completely vanishing as she fell. She closes her eyes, wishing she could spar with him just one more time, even though she knows it is a completely ridiculous dream for a prisoner. Suddenly, the heavy door latch clicks open. Lucien walks in, looking completely relaxed. He notes that the doctor said she is suffering from severe malnutrition and fatigue, and asks how she is feeling. He leans against the stone wall, crossing his arms with a confident smile. He asks if she is strong enough to hold a sword again. Felicia gasps, looking shocked. She stammers, asking what he could possibly mean by that. Lucien walks around her room, casually noting that she seems to be enjoying the comfortable prison life a bit too much. He reaches down and grabs her untouched loaf of bread. He takes a massive bite, looking her straight in the eyes. He says he did not drag her all the way to Kelheim, just so she could retire. He gets straight to the point, asking if she wants to let her talent with the sword actually bloom. His amber eyes are glowing with absolute conviction. He says he has no intention of letting a monster like her remain an average fighter. He tells her he is going to recommend her to become the official disciple of the Sword Saint, Sir Eisen. Felicia's face darkens. She bites her lower lip, her voice trembling with anger as she asks if he is mocking her. She stands up, screaming that it is already ridiculous enough for a maid and a woman to hold a sword, let alone become the student of a living legend. She falls to her knees, staring at the floor, in complete despair. She says she knows her place, and she is not a fool who believes in fairy tales. Lucien watches her quietly. He realizes her reaction is completely natural, given her trauma. Even though she carried the blood of a marquise, she was treated like garbage by her siblings because she was an illegitimate child and a woman. She was forbidden from ever learning the sword, which is why she eventually fled and became the sword demon Felix. He looks down at her, his voice softening. He says he understands why she cannot trust his words, so he is going to let her make her own decision. He turns toward the door, leaving the choice completely in her hands. But before he steps out, he stops and looks back over his shoulder. He looks at her trembling form and tells her to never give up on the sword. He says she is only her truest self when she is holding a blade. Those words echo in Felicia's mind as she sits alone in the quiet cell. A single tear falls onto her clenched fist. She remembers how her own family tore the sword away from her. She suddenly stands up and runs toward the door, calling out his name. With tears streaming down her face, she asks if she truly has the right to follow her dream without being bound by her status or her past. Lucien looks back at her, his amber eyes shining in the dim light. He tells her that her own will is the only thing that matters. He swears on his own name, Lucien Valdec, that he will make it happen. In the past life, Jake sat under a tree with a young Felix, asking what his dream was. Jake joked that while everyone else wanted money and power, Felix seemed different. He asked if Felix wanted to be a knight captain or get a fancy title. Felix looked down, touching his wooden sword, admitting he had never thought about the future. But then, he smiled. A bright, beautiful smile that Jake never forgot. He said his only dream was to devote himself entirely to the sword, completely free from the chains of the world. And that alone was more than enough. So, we are at the grand training arena of Kelheim. Our guy is leading Felicia and Hugo down the corridor. But as they walk, Lucien stops. His giant dad is already standing there with Edwin. Lucien plays dumb, asking why the boss of the house decided to show up. Sigmund just gives him a look that says he knows exactly what his son is playing at. Hugo and Felicia immediately drop to their knees because they value their lives. Sigmund looks down at Hugo first, acknowledging his solid work in the border town. Then, he immediately hits him with a reality check, reminding him his past crimes still weigh more than his current merits. He notes that, despite this, Lucian still begged for Hugo to be knighted, even offering to give up his own rewards. Hugo's brain completely short-circuits. He realized his young master went to bat for him that hard. Sigmund says he refused the request because Hugo is simply not ready for that level of honor yet. But he tells Hugo to keep grinding, keep earning achievements, and he will personally guarantee his title later. The giant actually smiles. He respects the grind. Hugo looks like he is ready to run through a brick wall for the Valdec family now. Then, Sigmund turns. He looks straight at Felicia. He reminds her of the stakes. Lucian is risking his entire standing in the succession war just to put her in front of the Sword Saint. He warns her that if she flops today, the entire empire will laugh at Lucian for being a simp. He looks down coldly, asking if she actually has the worth to back up his son's gamble. Felicia is freezing up, but Lucian steps right in front of her. He flashes that trademark smug smile, telling his dad that of course she is worthy. He says everyone probably thinks he is an absolute clown for bringing a maid to a Sword Saint trial. His golden eyes narrow. He knows the entire room is about to realize she is a once-in-a-generation genius who was just held back by classic fantasy nobility sexism. Then he leans over and whispers to her to stop shaking and start acting confident. Sigmund and Edwin watch the whisper. Sigmund turns back. The author throws in a dramatic angel wing metaphor because this is a manhwa and we need visual flair. Sigmund says if they are that confident, they better prove it right now. He tells them to prepare for the evaluation. Lucian bows, and the reflection on the polished floor shows his past life mercenary soul smiling right back. He thanks his father as they walk into the massive arena. The stone ground is completely empty. The atmosphere is incredibly tense. And then, the legend himself walks down the stairs. Sir Eisen Breitner is surprised to see both the young master and the Grand Duke waiting for him. But as the resident Sword Saint, his curiosity was too high to stay away. Lucian tells the old man to ignore his reputation and grade this girl with absolute, brutal honesty. He smirks. He wants the evaluation to be as harsh as possible, so his dad can't call it a fluke. Eisen remembers the promise Lucian made to find him a worthy successor. He looks down at Felicia. His eyes narrow with absolute seriousness. The wind sweeps across the arena floor. The two face each other on the stone circle. Felicia can feel the entire atmosphere of the room shift just from the old man's presence. She bows, saying it is an honor to meet him. She starts introducing herself. But Eisen completely ignores her name and draws a wooden practice sword. He drives it straight into the solid stone floor. He tells her that names do not matter here, and she needs to let her sword do the talking. He orders her to pull it out. Up on the balcony, Sigmund and Lucian watch. Lucian realizes the old man condensed his mana to drive that wooden blade twice as deep into solid rock. He knows Felicia cannot pull it out with raw physical strength, but if she uses her mana circulation, it will be easy. Felicia approaches the sword, knowing this is her one shot at freedom. She grips the hilt, trying to remember how she saw her brother Philip manipulate his mana. She pulls, and she actually yanks it clean out of the stone with a massive smile. She looks up happily, asking what she should do next. But Eisen's face is completely blank. He tells her the test is already over and there is nothing left to see. Felicia's smile completely vanishes. He grabs her wrist. He tells her that her internal mana is a complete mess because she neglected her circulation out of a fear of pain. Lucian watches coldly. Eisen says she is just another arrogant kid, relying purely on raw natural talent, without doing the actual boring homework. He admits she has raw talent since she survived a clash with the Black Lions in that weak body, but he says her basic attitude towards swordsmanship is trash. He tells her to go back to whatever master taught her and actually learn how to listen. Felicia stands in the shadow, her voice trembling as she admits she never had a master to teach her. She starts crying, admitting she does not even know what mana management or circulation actually means. She grips the wooden sword, shouting that she is just a fool who wants to learn. She bows deeply, begging him to teach her. Eisen's eyes go wide. He realizes she just manipulated her mana to pull that sword out of solid stone purely by mimicking what she saw her brother do once. She says she just felt the weight and speed of her brother's sword shift when his blue energy pulsed. Eisen's brain completely short-circuits. Internal mana is not something you can just see with your eyes. Even he needs physical contact to read it. He breaks out in a cold sweat, realizing this girl is a complete freak of nature who is manipulating a sixth sense through raw willpower. Up on the balcony, Lucian just smiles. The old man is looking at a literal masterpiece of martial talent. And suddenly, the action starts. Felicia lunges forward. Eisen stands perfectly still, holding his wooden sword with one hand. She descends from the air, a straight line dash. She swings down with everything she has. Eisen blocks it effortlessly, the impact shaking the entire floor. He calmly tells her that her movements are sloppy, her blade is dull, and her resolve is pathetic. His green eyes narrow. He asks if her desperation is only worth this much. He flicks his wrist and taps her blade away. She slides back across the stone. She realizes she is already at her physical limit, and her sword is not even making him take a single step. She gulps. This is what the absolute peak of the sword looks like, an insurmountable gap. But she is a future general. She does not fold. She strikes the stone ground, sending a massive slab of rock flying into the air to block his vision. The impact splits the air. She leaps behind the debris, pointing her blade straight down. She attacks from a completely blind, unorthodox angle. The wood meets wood. A massive explosion of dust. But Aizen is still standing there, completely untouched, like a raid boss that has not even taken shield damage. Under his breath, he admits he is impressed by her fighting spirit and her free, unconstrained thinking. But he says it is still not enough. He takes his first step forward. His mana erupts. He tells her to pour out all the resentment she has been holding inside her entire life. A line of red sword energy splits the room. Felicia screams and charges with her final spark of strength. A massive red spectral tiger roars behind her as she swings. Her eyes are completely bloodshot. She lets out all the anger of being the neglected, abused, illegitimate child who was never allowed to hold a sword. Her face is pure fury. Aizen prepares to meet the strike. The clash of their blades creates a blinding explosion of red and white light that fills the entire arena. Up on the balcony, the dust slowly rises. Sigmund and Lucian look down at the aftermath. Sigmund asks his son if he knows what actually makes a reliable swordsman. He says it is someone who has engraved the price of hardship directly into their bones. Fundamentals polished through endless, boring repetition. A warrior who forged their path on actual battlefields where one mistake means death. Lucian listens quietly as his father explains that these are the only types of people he keeps in his inner circle. But then, Sigmund admits that occasionally, the world produces monsters who can effortlessly leap over the towers normal people build. Geniuses who burn as bright as the sun. And like a wave that swallows everything, their talent inspires pure fear. He looks at Felicia, admitting she is one of those monsters. He tells Lucian that his choice was absolutely correct. Lucian smiles, saying if his father had not granted them this chance, her light would have been buried forever. He notes that there are countless geniuses in this world who die in the shadows just because they never got a single opportunity to show their worth. Comment section is probably going to be fighting over whether talent or hard work is better. But in this house, talent with results is king. Down on the field, Sir Aizen takes her wooden blade and examines it. He looks at her with a soft, proud smile. He says she was born with the destiny to wield a sword, and her eyes can truly see the path. A golden visual of Aizen's perfect mana pathways appears, showing her what lies beyond common sense. Felicia stands in a massive, cosmic web of white starlight, realizing the true scale of the journey she is about to begin. The wind blows through the trees, clearing the dust from the training yard. Aizen holds her sword out, asking for her name once more now that she has proven her worth. He tells her that from this day on, no one in this empire will ever doubt her name again. Felicia looks up, her eyes filling with tears. She raises the blade and speaks proudly, introducing herself as Felicia. She explains that her mother had no title, and her trash father from House Logren never permitted her to use his surname, so she only has her first name. Aizen looks down, closing his eyes. He says she endured that hellish life well. And then he drops a bomb that shocks her to her core. He calls her Felicia Brightener. He officially adopts her as his daughter, promising to teach her everything from peak swordsmanship to high noble etiquette. He smiles, warning her that her training is going to be absolute hell. He asks if she is ready for that level of hardship. Felicia drops to her knees, placing her forehead against her sword, hilt in a gesture of absolute loyalty. Aizen kneels down with her, admitting he was a stubborn old fool who judged her too quickly, and asks if she will be ready to persuade him with her blade when they inevitably clash. He looks at his new daughter with immense pride. Felicia weeps, promising to accept his feelings and prove herself through the sword. He puts a hand on her shoulder, saying that though their pasts were different, their hearts are aimed in the exact same direction. The crossed wooden and steel blades lie on the ground under a clear sky. Felicia Brightener, the future sword demon, has officially found her master. And somewhere in the Empire, the Logren family has no idea they just lost their greatest weapon to our guy. We start in a dark stone stairwell, lit only by a single torch. A hooded figure secretly hands a letter over to a messenger. The messenger looks incredibly nervous, asking what this means. The Shadow Lord explains that the Sword Saint has officially taken a disciple. He notes that, while the old master remained neutral, his new student will definitely swing the balance of the succession war. He looks out the window, realizing that if the candidate they backed, Jordy, is about to crash and burn, it is time to jump ship before it sinks. The camera pans down a torchlit wall, and we land on the new target. the ship named Lucian Valdek. Meanwhile, inside the Grand Study, Edwin is briefing Sigmund. He says that just as the Grand Duke predicted, the elders and maternal families are completely panicking. He asks if they should intervene before the siblings start tearing the estate apart. Sigmund stands looking out the window, looking like a classic final boss. He grunts, saying these noble families are the type to do whatever it takes to put their kids on the throne, completely ignoring the fact that they are just spoiling them. He tells Edwin to summon all the kids for a family dinner, to give them a fair stage to settle their beef. Because in this house, a true Valdek must speak with results and blood. Our guy is currently leaning on his hands, smiling like an absolute menace. He is ready to see who has actual fangs. The scene cuts to the massive Valdek mansion at night. Lucian is walking down the hall with a servant. The maids are gossiping, whispering as he approaches. The moment he steps onto the red carpet, the entire staff drops to a bow. Lucian waves them off, telling them to just go about their business. They whisper that he has finally become a true leader. He smiles, noting that the attitude of the servants in the main house has completely flipped. It is a classic case of public success, forcing people to respect you. He thinks about how he expected the Sword Saint alliance to be a win, but the level of clout he is currently getting is far exceeding his wildest dreams. He looks out at a carriage, thinking about what kind of monster Felicia is going to become under Sir Eisen's training. He stops in front of a massive set of double doors. He fixes his collar, smirking, because it is time to go to work. The heavy doors slowly creak open. Inside the dining room, his brothers are already sitting there, looking like they just swallowed a lemon. He instantly reads their faces. Long, sour, and absolutely miserable. Beautiful. He slides into his seat with zero hesitation. Geordie is practically blowing steam out of his nose in sheer frustration. Lucian speaks up, saying how wonderful it is to see the family gathered together. He smiles, asking Geordie if he agrees. Geordie rubs his ring, his voice dripping with venom. He tells Lucian to stop acting triumphant, because luck does not last forever, and he needs to watch his behavior. Lucian claps his hands together, his face turning into a caricature of pure innocence. He thanks Geordie for looking out for him, asking how he knew Lucian was feeling a bit too excited lately. He crosses his arms, saying he knows Geordie's sharp words are actually just brotherly love. He throws his hands out, bringing up the time Geordie cut off his own personal night after the training grounds fiasco. Then he brings up how Geordie paid a massive settlement after his head maid, Jenny, got caught embezzling. He pretends to be deeply touched by Geordie's sacrifice. Then he looks up and asks how Jenny is doing lately. He smiles, noting that he made sure to stop whipping her right before she actually died. Geordie is seething, his face turning a lovely shade of purple. Joshua is sweating in his seat, thinking his second brother should probably just shut up before Lucian collects more interest on this roast. The butler stands in the back, trying his absolute best to look like a wall. Joshua can't take the disrespect anymore and slams the table, standing up. He screams that Lucian is crossing the line, and Geordie was only trying to help him. He demands that Lucian apologize to Geordie right now. But the second Lucian looks at him, Joshua's voice cracks, and his smile turns incredibly stiff. Lucian's eyes narrow into cold, golden slits. Our guy leans back, stretching lazily, and says this is exactly why you can't be nice to kids. His face turns into a terrifying, dark glare. He asks Joshua if he wants to go back to the training grounds for another live steel physical therapy session. Joshua instantly cowers, looking like a puppy that just heard thunder. Suddenly, the side door clicks. The three brothers instantly drop the drama and look like model students. Grand Duke Sigmund steps into the room, and all three stand up to greet him. They offer their formal greetings. Sigmund looks at them, noting that raising their voices at dinner shows they have plenty of vigor, and that is perfect, because he is sending all of them directly to the battlefield. The scene shifts to the crescent moon hanging over the estate. The dinner is officially underway, and the mood is heavy. Sigmund asks if they are familiar with the Empire Liberation Alliance. He explains that remnants of the conquered states have gathered, causing trouble and assassinating nobles. He says he previously sent their eldest brother Tristan to the Bornholm region to crush them, but a new report just came in that complicates the entire situation. Geordie and Joshua look tense. Lucian remains completely calm. A monster migration. Lucian's eyes narrow. He knows this is a massive problem. For those who do not play MMOs, a migration is when a massive population of high-level monsters abnormally multiplies and sweeps through territories looking for food. The historical records say a bad one can easily wipe out entire fortresses and villages. Sigmund says the Bornholm migration cycle shouldn't be for another 30 years, but they can't ignore the signs, and Tristan is currently fighting a two-front war against monsters and rebels. Lucian realizes this is why their father wants to send them to the front lines. Sigmund touches his chin, thinking. He says one of his sons must go and clear the clouds over Bornholm. He asks for volunteers to step forward and help their big brother. Geordie looks frustrated, realizing that volunteering to help Tristan is a complete trap. Since Tristan is already in command, any success they achieve will just be credited to the eldest brother's ledger. Geordie speaks up, asking if it is truly necessary for one of the heirs to go. He suggests it would be far more efficient to just send reinforcements under a normal knight commander. Sigmund turns his gaze to Joshua, asking if he agrees. Joshua stammers, agreeing that Geordie's plan makes the most sense. Typical side character behavior. But Lucian speaks up, saying that is actually impossible. He explains that if House Valdek deploys a large-scale army, the surrounding lords will instantly panic. Joshua gasps, asking if Lucian thinks the neighbors will accuse them of planning an invasion under the guise of rebellion control. He slams the table, screaming that the neighbors have no right to suspect a great house like Valdek. Lucian smiles, saying that while Joshua's pride is cute, reality is a bit different. He points out that if the Emperor or the rival Marquise's faction suspect them of military expansion, it will put the imperial family in an impossible position. Sigmund puts his cup down, agreeing with Lucian's assessment. He notes that large troop movements are bound to make everyone nervous, especially with the current political tension. Geordie and Joshua look absolutely defeated. Sigmund asks Lucian what he suggests instead. Lucian says they need a force that can handle the rebels without making the surrounding territories nervous. And for a veteran mercenary captain, there is only one logical answer. A force that has combat experience and operates purely on contracts. A local armed group that avoids any political controversy. He says they must hire the mercenaries of Bornholm. But to control an unruly pack of wild dogs, you need a leash. And that leash must carry the blood of House Valdek. He points a thumb at himself, flashing a massive fanged smirk as he volunteers for the mission. A few weeks later, a massive wooden ship is sailing through the clear blue ocean. Lucian and Hugo are standing on the deck. Lucian holds a silver coin, thinking about how mercenaries are always a pain to deal with. They only care about gold, but gold cannot buy their actual loyalty. They will tear up yesterday's contract the second things get slightly too warm on the battlefield. In his head, Chibi Lucian is shaking his head, noting that as a former mercenary captain, he knows exactly how trash their mindset is. He knows their golden rule is to survive, even if it means abandoning their employer. But he also knows how to manipulate them. The real challenge is his eldest brother, Tristan Valdek. He remembers Tristan from his past life, a rigid, rule-bound military purist with absolutely zero chill. Back when Jake was a gate guard, Tristan would physically discipline people for having a slightly dirty uniform or taking a 5-second break. He flips his coin into the air. He knows a strict guy like Tristan will never negotiate with greedy mercenaries, which is exactly why this mission is the perfect stage for Lucian. He catches the coin, a massive, devious grin spreading across his face. This situation is basically a buffet of free achievements, designed specifically for a veteran commander. Hugo is sweating in the back, looking completely traumatized by how unhinged his young master looks right now. Seagulls fly over the ship as it approaches the coast. The vessel officially docks at a grand stone port. The crew secures the ropes. Lucian steps onto the dock, greeting Captain Raymond of the Black Lions. Raymond notes that Lucian volunteered for a highly dangerous mission, and because of the high stakes, he brought the absolute best escorts for the job. Nixon and the other heavy elite Shadow Knights are already waiting in the sea fog. He explains that the rest of the unit is already on the field, gathering intelligence, and will meet them at the coordinate. He asks if they should head straight to Tristan's base, and Lucian agrees. Suddenly, we hear running footsteps. A group of hooded rebel soldiers bursts through a nearby archway. Don't let them escape! The rebels are running for their lives, their leader trying to buy them some time. Behind them, armored Valdek knights are chasing them down on horseback. The rebel leader spots Lucian and his escorts standing on the street. He decides to kill the two guards and take the rich noble kid hostage to buy their escape. He draws his sword, aiming for a quick strike. But before he can even blink, Lucian slides right into his personal space, looking up at him with a terrifying golden-eyed smile. Our guy crackles with gold-blue mana, asking the rebel why they don't let him join in on the fun. The poor guy is about to find out exactly why you do not try to hostage take a reincarnated mercenary captain. The air instantly splits with a cold blue light as Lucian activates his mana. And before the rebel leader can even register what is happening, he faceplants onto the stone dock, completely knocked out cold. The rest of the ambush party goes completely pale, screaming in confusion because their squad leader just got folded in a millisecond. They look at our guy like they just saw a ghost. They realized this kid is definitely not the fragile noble bait they thought he was. He did not even draw his blade. He literally subdued their strongest guy using nothing but his scabbard. Absolute main character energy. Lucian looks down at his hand, his expression shifting from a fake sweet smile to a cold, analytical gaze. Under his breath, he is absolutely buzzing. For the first time, his physical body is actually keeping up with his veteran reaction speed. His nectar-refined heart is pumping mana through his pathways like a volcano, with zero lag and zero resistance. In his mind, his entire nervous system is glowing with a brilliant, roaring blue light. This is what peak performance actually looks like. He looks at the remaining rebels, who are standing there shaking like they are trying to fight a raid boss with starter gear. Our guy asks them very politely if they still cannot grasp the gravity of their current situation. He flares his blue mana, sending a physical shockwave across the stone street that makes the wind howl. He tells them there will be no more warnings. Get on your knees, right now. And we hear the beautiful sound of steel hitting the floor. A simple iron sword clatters onto the stone tiles. The vice leader of the squad drops to his knees, completely breaking down. He realizes they stand absolutely zero chance of survival. They start begging for mercy, crying about how they only joined the rebellion to feed their innocent families. Lucian watches them quietly, his gold eyes remaining completely still. But beneath their submissive posture, he can see the raw resentment and anger burning in their eyes. He sighs internally. This is the exact reason why war always leaves a bitter aftertaste. He smoothly sheathes his sword back into his belt with a clean click. He tells them that as long as they cooperate, he will personally guarantee they receive a formal trial under imperial law. He warns them not to try anything stupid, but as he speaks, a massive shadow looms over the entire street. Heavy, armored horses come riding through the stone archway with a deafening rumble. A massive iron boot steps down into the stirrup, and a deep, merciless voice echoes across the dock, saying imperial procedures are only meant for actual citizens. A giant of a man with dark auburn hair stands looking down at the prisoners. He says the exact moment these commoners pointed their blades at the Empire, they stopped being citizens and became simple pests. First young master Tristan Valdec has officially entered the chat, and he says there is only one correct verdict: immediate execution. The rebel leader's eyes go wide with pure rage. Realizing he is dead either way, he pulls a hidden dagger and lunges straight at Tristan's throat. But Tristan does not even flinch. He stands there looking completely bored. A single, blinding red flash splits the darkness. The silhouette of the rebel is instantly torn apart in a spray of dark blood. Tristan's massive blade cleanly impales him, ending the fight before it even begins. The remaining rebels scream in horror as their comrades' blood splatters across their faces. Tristan shakes the blood off his blade, turning to look at Lucian. He tells his younger brother to engrave this sight directly into his mind. He says this merciless, clinical violence is the exact standard and principle that keeps House Valdec at the top of the food chain. He stands tall, his heavy iron plate armor looking completely imposing against the sea fog. The scene shifts to the dark, gothic walls of Bornholm Fortress. A tattered black flag flies over the stone towers as crows circle the gray sky. The entire region looks like a dark fantasy nightmare. Inside the command room, Lucian stands looking out the window. He remembers Tristan was a stubborn, rigid purist in his previous life, but he never expected him to be this radically violent. And what is even worse, our guy realizes he has absolutely zero memory of this Bornholm incident from his past life. Even though he was actively serving as a soldier during this exact period, a massive double crisis like this should have been historic. He crosses his arms, realizing there is definitely a much larger, darker puzzle piece here that he is missing. He walks over to the giant strategic map table, pointing out that the security perimeter of the fortress is practically empty. Tristan rests his iron gauntlet on the table, admitting the situation is incredibly grim. He explains that their main forces are locked in a permanent standoff with the Rebel Alliance. And to make things worse, the mercenaries they hired to fill the security gap are currently holding the fortress hostage for more gold. Lucian looks down, thinking that Tristan is trying to apply rigid, noble logic to a pack of greedy wild dogs, which never works. He gestures casually, saying the mercenaries easily read that Tristan has zero intention of ever negotiating with them again. Tristan narrows his eyes, saying he will never let scum extort the Empire while he is in command. He looks at Lucian, sighing as he admits he does not expect much from a pampered third young master. He tells him to just stay out of the way, act as a nominal commander, and make sure the mercenaries do not run away when things go south. He says that is the only basic task he is trusting him with. Lucian's face remains completely flat. Our guy's mouth curls into a very dangerous, subtle grin. He tells his big brother that he seems to be completely mistaken about two very important things. First, he was not forced down here, he actively volunteered. And second, he already has a perfect plan to solve this mercenary problem. He slams a sealed letter onto the wooden map, showing the red wax seal of the Valdec lion. He looks up with a brilliant, predatory glare, informing Tristan that their father has granted him full, absolute jurisdiction over the mercenaries. As he walks out of the dark fortress under the moonlight, Lucian smirks. He He is about to show these mercenaries what a real boss looks like. The scene shifts to a massive, rowdy tavern in the middle of the lower town, echoing with loud, obnoxious laughter. Inside, the place is packed to the brim with tattered, scarred mercenaries drinking and feasting like kings. At the center table, Redblade Sven raises a massive wooden mug, shouting at his men to eat and drink as much as they want. The entire tavern cheers, raising their drinks and shouting praises to their captain, and the stupid noble lords who are funding them. They are absolutely living it up, completely convinced they have the upper hand. His green-haired vice-captain leans over with a sleazy grin, praising Sven for having the absolute guts to extort House Valdek. Sven slams his mug onto the table with a loud bang, spilling liquor everywhere. He laughs smugly, saying they are not the ones who are sweating bullets right now. With the rebel forces closing in and the demonic beast migration approaching, the Valdeks are completely desperate. The vice-captain smirks, asking if they just have to hold out until the nobles break and bring them bundles of gold. Sven thickens his grin, literally licking his lips in anticipation. He says the exact moment the nobles show up with the money is when they will slowly pretend to cooperate. He laughs boisterously, shouting that he has already coordinated with the surrounding mercenary groups to keep the pressure high. But suddenly, the vice-captain's ears twitch as he hears a slow, rhythmic tapping sound. A gloved hand is lightly tapping against the wooden doorframe. The entire tavern goes quiet as they look toward the entrance, wondering what kind of crazy bastard just walked in. Standing in the doorway, under the sea fog, are Lucian and Alistair, looking completely calm. Our guy flashes a sweet, angelic smile that is so fake, it is honestly terrifying. He walks into the tavern with his hands behind his back, looking like he is just taking a casual evening stroll. He notes that Sven has quite the knack for leadership, and if he were a mercenary captain, he probably would have done the exact same thing. He stops right in front of Sven's table, pointing out that seizing opportunities only works before a contract is finalized. His golden eyes narrow into a cold, dead stare as he addresses Redblade Sven directly. The surrounding mercenaries instantly reach for their axes and daggers, the atmosphere turning ice cold. Sven looks at the slender teenager and bursts out into a massive, mocking laugh. He stands up, shouting to his men to pay their respects because the rich noble lord has brought them their bundles of money. The entire tavern erupts into sarcastic cheers, mocking the young master for his supposed generosity. Sven's laughing reflection is mirrored directly in Lucian's quiet, motionless eyes. Sven pours a dark stream of liquor into a mug, telling the kid to wet his whistle before they start their long talk. He leans in with a smug sneer, saying they should clear up any misunderstandings since he has been waiting so anxiously. Lucian's cold face is reflected perfectly in the rippling surface of the dark alcohol. Our guy crosses his arms, stating flatly that between House Valdek and them, only a contract exists. He points out that there shouldn't be any complications, especially since Sven's group already pocketed half the advance payment. Sven scoffs, pulling a small silver coin out and laughing in his face. He asks if Lucian is talking about this pathetic pocket change. He tosses it aside, calling it nothing more than alms given to poor, lowly commoners. He slaps his vice-captain on the shoulder, laughing that such a small amount cannot even cover their daily meals for a high-risk mission. He smirks, saying he cannot even feed his elderly mother back home with that trash payment. He leans close, asking if it isn't best for everyone, if things are mutually beneficial. Lucian's golden eyes remain completely unreadable. Our guy slowly reaches behind his back, saying if money is the issue, then there is no need to beat around the bush. He tosses a single, massive coin onto the wooden table with a heavy ring. Sven and the vice-captain instantly freeze. The vice-captain stammers, asking if this is a Wilhelm the Great commemorative coin. The platinum coin shines brilliantly under the dim tavern lights. And then, Lucian reaches into his pouch and lets a whole rain of those massive platinum coins fall onto the table. Our guy flashes a wide, unhinged, double-fanged grin, telling them they should make sure they are properly compensated for their lives. Sven breaks out in a cold sweat, gulping hard, as his brain instantly labels this kid as a complete, soft-headed, noble pushover. He frantically jumps to his feet, shouting that he has committed a grave discourtesy to such a generous young master. He bows deeply, swearing that he will put his life on the line and assemble all the surrounding mercenary groups with a single word. He reaches his hand down to quickly gather up the precious platinum coins scattered near Lucian's boots. His fingers are just inches away from the metal. But suddenly, Lucian's shadow completely blocks out the light. The temperature in the tavern drops to absolute zero as Lucian's voice echoes through the silence. He addresses the entire room. On the name of Valdek, I issue a request to you all. Kill Redblade Sven. The reward is all of these platinum coins. The entire tavern goes completely still. Every single mercenary slowly looks up, their eyes glowing with pure, unadulterated greed. Sven's face turns pale with horror. He glares at Lucian, asking what kind of sick trick he is trying to pull. Lucian just tilts his head, his face completely cold, as he says he is simply solving this issue with money, just like they wanted. He grabs a wooden mug, stating calmly that a mercenary without credit is nothing more than a common thug with a knife. And since Sven broke his contract, he has officially lost all his credit. He raises the mug, telling the room they have until he finishes this drink. The exact moment he empties it, the reward cuts in half. The mercenaries instantly draw their daggers and axes, slowly circling Sven like a pack of starving wolves. Sven panics, screaming at his men that they are idiots for believing a noble's promise, shouting that he will kill the first one who steps forward. He backs up against the counter, sweating profusely as he begs Lucian to withdraw the request, promising to work for just a third of the price. But Lucian just keeps drinking, his throat moving slowly as the liquor disappears. Sven screams in absolute terror, crying that he was wrong, and promising to act like Lucian's loyal dog immediately. A single droplet falls from the empty mug, as Lucian sets it down with a clean click. He looks at Sven with a freezing gaze, saying there is a very simple reason why he is in that position. And that is when the hammer drops. A dark, green-haired shadow lunges from behind, driving a jagged iron axe straight into Sven's neck. Sven gasps, looking back at his vice-captain in complete betrayal. The vice-captain just grins, saying Sven climbed to the top the exact same way, so he just decided to strike first. He rips the axe out, and Sven collapses to the floor as a fountain of dark blood splatters across the wood. The rest of the tavern stands in absolute, stunned silence, completely paralyzed by the sheer coldness of the play. The glittering platinum coins sit perfectly undisturbed in a growing pool of fresh blood. The vice-captain stands panting, covered in his leader's blood, asking with a creepy grin if the promised reward will be honored. Lucian smiles, his gold eyes shining under the dim tavern lights, as he offers his congratulations on the vice-captain's permanent retirement. And just like that, without even unsheathing his sword, our guy completely dismantled the mercenary threat, using nothing but his brain and their own greed. Remember Sven's green-haired vice-captain? The guy who literally axed his boss in the neck for some quick cash? Yeah, he grabs the bag of platinum and immediately bolts out the front door, like he just pulled off a successful heist. But remember, these are mercenaries. Loyalty does not exist here, and his friends immediately decide they want a piece of that massive retirement fund. Within seconds, the street outside is painted red. Back in the tavern, our guy Lucian is completely unbothered, calmly holding his drink while looking at the absolute chaos he just caused. He casually suggests making a toast to the newly retired vice-captain, because why let a good drink go to waste? The rest of the mercenaries are standing there sweating, trying to process the absolute psychological warfare this teenager just dropped on them. Lucian slowly sips his drink, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. He looks around the quiet room and tells them not to be too disappointed, because the fun is just getting started. He flashes that signature, completely untrustworthy noble smile, and says he is always happy to pay people who actually get the job done. He pulls out another shiny platinum coin, casually reminding them that his pockets are basically bottomless. And then he drops the hook. He notes that Sven was actually right about one thing. Fighting the Empire's worst criminals is a highly dangerous career choice. So, to make it worth their while, he is giving them a new mission. Hunt down every single rebel and criminal in the region. The rate? 1 entire platinum coin for every single head they bring back. And if they bring them back breathing, they get a fat bonus on top. Just like that, the entire room goes absolutely wild, chanting his name like he is the second coming of a tax refund. While they start planning to raid every nearby mountain, Lucian just sits back, looking like a corporate boss who successfully outsourced his entire workforce. The coin spins on the table, and the mercenaries are already running out to recruit every single sword for hire they can find. Seriously, look at this grin. The author is not even trying to hide that our protagonist is the real villain of this arc. Meanwhile, Captain Raymond of the Black Lions is sitting in his room, probably questioning his entire life choices. He has seen seasoned generals plan military campaigns, but he has never seen a kid dismantle an entire mercenary rebellion in 10 minutes. The next day, Lucian calls Raymond over for a quick chat before they head out to the official rebel hideout. He picks up another heavy bag of coins, because of course he does. He tells Raymond to just stand next to him, look intimidating, and keep his mouth shut no matter what happens. Lucian explains his entire strategy. When you are dealing with people who do not even respect the law, trying to force them with violence is a waste of time. What they actually need is something so sweet and tempting that it completely rots them from the inside out. Raymond stands there in the shadows, realizing he completely misjudged this kid. He thought Lucian was just another spoiled noble, trying to throw money at a problem, until it went away. But Lucian was actually playing multi-dimensional chess. He knew these mercenaries would instantly betray anyone for a quick payday. So instead of fighting them, he gave them a reward so massive, they had no choice but to purge their own leadership. He turned their own toxic greed into a weapon and let them do all the dirty work for him. Raymond is looking at him now like he is a complete menace, which is honestly a very fair assessment. It is rough, it is dirty, and it is definitely not what they teach you in noble etiquette class. But you cannot argue with the results. The kid is chillingly meticulous. Now let's cut back to the Dark Forest, where we see several platinum coins literally covered in fresh blood. The green-haired vice captain is standing alone, completely covered in the blood of his former co-workers. He is heavily injured, panting, and looks like he barely survived a battle royale. But his grip on that blood-stained hand axe is still tighter than ever. He looks around the silent woods, trying to make sure there are no more ambushers waiting in the bushes. He finally collapses onto the grass, completely exhausted. And then he starts smiling. He actually starts laughing like a cartoon villain who thinks he just won the lottery. He gloats over the bodies, mocking his old captain Sven for being a meathead who did not know how to play the game. He tells the corpses they should have just taken their single coin and left, instead of getting blinded by greed. The sheer hypocrisy of this man is almost impressive. He literally killed his boss an hour ago for the exact same bag. But before he can even finish his victory speech, a massive shadow with glowing eyes materializes right behind him. The red moon is shining, and the death flag is flying high. A cold blade is pressed against his neck, and a voice tells him he actually agrees with that logic. The vice captain instantly reverts back to a crying, sweating coward, offering to split the money 50-50. But the shadow is not interested in negotiations. The vice captain realizes he is completely cooked. Figures. There was no way his life was actually going to turn out this well. One quick, silent slash in the dark, and he becomes just another nameless corpse on the forest floor. Surprise! The shadow is none other than our favorite giant purple-haired butler, Black Shark Hugo. This means Lucian did not actually lose a single penny of that massive platinum bounty. Hugo casually picks up the bag of coins from the dead man's fingers. Under the pale moonlight, the cleanup crew has successfully finished the job. Hugo walks back through the dark woods, carrying the entire fortune back to its rightful owner. Seriously, having a giant, elite Underworld boss as your personal assistant is easily the best investment Lucian has made so far. Back in the office, Hugo dumps the entire bag of platinum coins right back onto Lucian's desk. Lucian taps one of the coins, probably feeling incredibly smug about how perfectly his plan worked out. He did not just eliminate the corrupt mercenary leadership, he also got them to do it themselves, kept all his money, and secured their absolute loyalty. He looks out the window, realizing that having Hugo around is basically like playing a strategy game with cheat codes. But while this problem is solved, a much bigger storm is brewing on the horizon, and our guy is going to need every single sword he can get.